The chill wind of winter is here. 2502. My companions and I are cold, irritable, and hungry. Warmth and rest seem like strange and impossible bedfellows, and I see the eyes of the ruinous powers on the horizon. The climb up the mountains was harrowing beyond belief, and as we reached the summit, I could hear the collective gasp, and I too joined that chorus. As I stood upon the precipice of this mountainous hell, the sky crackled with lightning and power. After Cassine's death, I could feel the winds now, that feeling, that sixth sense tingling my neck as my eyes wrapped around the six towers. A laughter of eldritch cold enraptured the sky. Every piece of my body wanted to run, to flee, to never return. But the letter in my bag said otherwise, and my blood compelled me where my body wouldn't. I wouldn't dare say the name of this place aloud to my companions. They needn't know what they were walking into, only our objective. Emmanuel Posner, my vampiric mistress, lay somewhere in this accursed place. I know nothing about her travels or her plans, but as her swain and champion, as her thrall, I am compelled to aid her. Some of my companions follow due to greed, some follow for honor, but all of us must do this, to delve deep into the hellish halls of Castle Drachenfels.
Sigmar is dead, little Victor. He's been dead for millennia. That fire you feel isn't fame, it's failure.
Published in 1992, the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition Adventure module is certainly one of the later additions in the WIFRIP 1E lineup. Especially compared to the most prominent modules, the series of The Enemy Within and the Doomstones, Castle Drachenfels stands unique as less a selection of story modules and more WIFRIP's answer to D&D's incredibly prominent and dangerous Tomb of Horrors. Castle Drachenfels does provide a number of broad scenarios for a party to complete, which range from treasure delves to felling the main man, Constant Drachenfels, himself. These scenarios are usually meant to be taken one at a time, although particularly confident parties and GMs can certainly do multiple at once. The module comes with a number of pre-generated characters that a party can use, or use their own characters, provided they are willing to risk them. As someone who has converted and ran Castle Drachenfels for my 4th edition party as of my 2024 Act 2 finale, I can say with certainty that the book serves fantastically as a mega dungeon filled to the brim with the weird, the gruesome, and the grim dark. A funny quirk of the critical rolification of TTRPGs is the push of the millennial theater kid style of game. Usually these games run off of more collaborative and accessible systems and commonly seem to have a ton of, well, millennial themes, such as an aversion to genuine grit, horror, the prevalence of safe horny, and constant modern pop culture references. Not saying that's a bad way to play, but more as a warning. If that style of game is your baseline for TTRPGs, you will have to adapt, perhaps radically, to adjust to Castle Drachenfels. You can still engage in collaborative storytelling, and I find the assertion that the castle is meant for a GM versus player mentality is a little silly. Yes, you can die in a random trap, as it was created by the most dangerous immortal alive. This would be akin to infiltrating, I don't know, Vecna's God Tower and then Pikachu facing and blaming the GM when someone dies in a devious trap. Warhammer is an extremely dangerous world, and the traps of Castle Drachenfels were built by perhaps the most dangerous man within such a world. As such, a party that chooses to go to Castle Drachenfels, from the player perspective, must acknowledge that their characters are at extreme risk and need to just be okay with that. Otherwise, play a pre-generated character or make a mercenary for the adventure. Of course, GM should adequately explain the danger of Castle Drachenfels too. Drachenfels is a figure of incredible and widespread myth and terror. While not everyone in a party will know of the castle's reputation, its sheer presence is dangerous enough to intuit the horror of such a place, and any well-versed academic career worth their salt would probably know that this is Castle Drachenfels. When I ran the castle, we only lost one character, and that was at the end after said character made many deliberate mistakes earlier to make things more interesting. So was it even a true loss? Granted, my party are also pretty damn cautious and intelligent about traps and dungeons, and usually have their wits about them. I shall be going over a tour of the castle, going over pertinent sections and rooms, explaining what a party may or may not encounter in such places, and as well as provide narrative tidbits of these rooms where applicable. So, without further ado, let us begin.
Are these weaklings truly your friends? Do you think keeping them alive makes up for all those you've failed?
The Grey Mountains are not necessarily the safest place for an adventurer to be. Indeed, between the months of Kaldazite and Flufskite, another reason why it's important for GMs to timekeep, in my opinion, is instances like this, there's a 30% chance of rainfall. Now, you may be wondering, Porky, are you telling me a light rainfall is a problem? Well, yes. Try climbing a mountain with medieval gear. Now do it while wet, slick, and cold. Also, your gunpowder weapons don't work in heavier rains, and you'll have to test for exposure. You can end up losing wounds just via the travel, if the GM is nasty enough, or if the dice aren't in your favor. The creatures here you can meet are also of variable strength. Bandits, ogres, harpies, flying puffins with razor-like beaks. Either way, once they reach the top of the mountain and bear witness to the castle, a few things shall happen.
What sort of oomgak nonsense is this? Everything is chaotic. The towers are asymmetrical, bent. Only evil would persist in such a place.
Master Dwarf, I spoke up. What do you mean? This place is, well, more ordered than I've ever seen.
That's why you are Umgay. Umgay.
But this didn't feel like improper perception. Were the towers always like this, when I bore my first witness upon them? With every blink, the entire line of buildings seemed to shift and sway, both inside and outside my perception. Was it changing? Or was it me and my exhaustion? When I looked upon a tower that rose as straight as an arrow, and yet Dundurl saw nothing but asymmetry, was this a quirk of our differences, or was it something more sinister? A laugh shrouded in iron seemed to pierce the sky. I wondered if my companions heard it. Did Tuinal, the elven bounty hunter, fear anything made by such a human? He was here for a purpose, although he refused to say why. Or Heidi Comte, reserved and hard, but her rallying cries kept us true in battle. Greed seemed to be her motive, enough to pay her outlaw band for life. Elmariel came here for naught but knowledge, and the ever-changing castle must have given him quite the excitement. Ursabet, a fellow follower of Verena, far more devout than I ever could be, was my only grounding mechanism here in this party. I hoped the goddess would save us both if we needed it. Jean-Paul's hand was constantly twitching. The Bretonnian's eyes were glinting across the rock and across every floor, looking for gold, looking for traps. In Dundurl, our stout dwarf companion here to pay a debt, whatever that meant. Were we truly ready for what awaited us? The castle's appearance can be radically different between people who view it. The very stones and foundation of the castle are steeped to the brim with constant Drachenfels' influence, and, as such, seeks to confuse invaders passively through such methods. While this isn't dangerous all on its own, a party that lacks cohesion might find themselves just a little less trusting of their fellows' ability to perceive it. Approaching the mountain peak, or perhaps the bridge to the castle, is where one might be attacked by the castle's carrion beast, a foul skeletal thing. While the creature itself might be relatively unimpressive, that's not really the point. A claw against rope here, a fell gust of wind there, and a party member might find themselves falling from the mountain into their doom. The walls of Castle Drachenfels are described as roughly 24 feet high, with a 5-foot width. The walls can be used to access the 6 primary towers around the courtyard of the castle. However, there are bits across the walls that are covered by rotted wood or crumbling stone. Enterprising players wishing to loot and explore each tower will find themselves requiring an initiative test, although smaller creatures such as halflings or gnomes certainly acquire a bonus to this, or else the bridge crumbles beneath them. In these walls, it is not beasts or ogres, but more simple physics that can kill a player. Of course, if a player doesn't actually specify that they are walking carefully or looking deeply, that's a -25 to the initiative check. The battlements are covered with all manner of trash loots, rusty arrows, rotted rope, and other such things. It is the towers, however, when things get interesting. No, I got it, I promise, I yelped across the battlements. Half of my torso was already above the rotted wood, but my feet dangled precariously above the cobble below. It wasn't until the timely intervention of Ursabet, priestess of Verena, that I was lifted to my feet, safely onto the battlements. I whispered my bits of thanks. Ursabet was strong, smart, and intense. Our mutual worship of Verena is nothing short of a goddess send, and only she seemed to recognize the Valian iconography on my chest and took great delight in aiding my affairs. She seemed almost eager to accept my request for accompaniment to the castle, and I couldn't help but get the feeling that she had more motive than the money I had promised. Come on, keep up, Fraulein. If you die here, I will never forgive you. She spoke to me, almost commanded me. A priestess of Verena indeed. We rejoined the group. We approached the battlement on the southwest side of the wall with more careful steps. This time, we wouldn't fall. The arch of the tower had pure darkness. Not a single candle emanated from within, and the moon did little to alight the tower's innards. Carefully, with Dundurl at the head, we entered the tower. We were not prepared for what we saw. We had entered the tower from the battlements, on its second floor. A massive table, replete with equally large and ornate dining chairs. Each held a skeleton, whose arms were manacled to the floor. A strange and awful feeling. Hunger. I was suddenly so hungry. A blink in the skeletons. They weren't corpses at all. They were people. Starving people. Screaming and moaning and viciously demanding more food. And floating above them, above us, was a man. Or was it? Obese as they come, he tore off chunks of the most delicious meat I had ever saw, a meat of fat and sinew and muscle. If it came off from an animal, I certainly wouldn't know about it. The starving people and I reached for the meat, so eager to taste its juices. But as the meat fell, as the people devoured it, there was no respite to the hunger. There was no respite from the urge. I should join them. I should sit. Begone, beastly vision! Ursabet rose her hands and spoke a spell. With holy word and power, she dispelled the illusion. I was on my knees, and my mouth was across Amariel's hand. I was eating the elf's hand. As I released my grip upon him, throat filled with apology, I realized none of us fared much better. Only Ursabet seemed to have the willpower to resist such a ghastly vision. Inside the Tower of Starvation, a party will find a number of skeletons, lusting after hunks of a chaos spawn, which is constantly being served by a floating fat man from up above. Already, this sentence is deranged, but a failed willpower test means the party will see through the skeleton's eyes, and indeed, all of them are simply humans trapped in eternal, magical starvation, forever eating a tumor-ridden chaos spawn, but never fulfilling their hunger. Both the skeletons, the spawn, and the floating man can serve as potential enemies here. While there is certain danger in this room, it comes more from the insanity points one would gain by witnessing the gruesome scene. North of the Tower of Starvation is the Tower of Weakness. Would-be adventurers are attacked by new monsters, unique to the module, known as Wraith Wisps. These wisps will reform every dusk unless a strange black sphere in the level above is destroyed. In the middle of such a sphere might be the first time the party will encounter a black shard, a cursed object that empowers the castle to harm the adventurers. Of course, destroying this will have great effect, if you manage to do it safely, and that's the key word. If you manage to safely destroy a black shard, all debuffs the castle gives you are nullified. This is very important, as otherwise, many of the castle's debuffs are functionally permanent, especially if you're running a harder module within the castle. Engaging with these black shards will be key. The other towers, that of Exhaustion and Despair, lack items of genuine interest and include progressive wasting debuffs that range from basic exhaustion to a ghost that, as the name implies, is filled to the brim with literal despair, an effect that can negatively impact the party, forcing them to engage in the horrors of super depression. Although there is a healing potion in the Tower of Despair as well. The Tower of Terror is placed in such a way magically intended to not only scare adventurers onto the rotting wood, deliberately causing them to fall, but also containing a rather nasty poltergeist enemy, gaining surprise on the party unless they pass a very hard initiative test. An enterprising wizard can actually gain a lot of ingredients in here, as the poltergeist was once a gnomish gemsmith. That said, the group does have to deal with a relatively vicious poltergeist combined with the terror of the tower, a bit of a joint effort. The courtyard contains the main building of the castle, as well as the stables, coach house, well, gates, and fountain. Of course, the well is standing water and must be boiled to be drunk safely, and the fountain is entirely dry. The stables contain horse skeletons, each able and willing to attack intruders if they get too close. However, an enterprising character can find a magical harness here, which gives a +20 to all ride tests. The coach house is one of the sillier parts of the adventure. Not only does the coach animate to attack an enterprising adventurer who tries to enter, should they strip any of its valuables or open the doors to sit inside, but there are many plaques of skaven heads that begin to float around the coach, biting and gnashing the adventurers. A headless horseman cackles and swings his scythe at those who might cross him, and the skeletons inside the coach will animate and attack as well. They are covered in jewels and finery, but they're not wights, simply normal skeletons dressed in lavish wear. If the party had entered the courtyard via the gatehouse instead of climbing the battlements, they would have found a dead mule, recently dead, an indication of other life stirring within the castle beyond strange illusions, ghosts, and the undead. Further, enemies and an acid bucket are here as well. Fun. These buildings actually have very little detail added to them and are meant for GM improvisation. Basic descriptions are given here and there and might range from a highly dangerous trap-filled bonanza to finding actual guests of constant Drachenfels. Either way, you may use this building and its rooms for a number of scenarios to fit into your game. This place can also be a solid headquarters for the enterprising adventurer, as there is a room within that boosts the power of Sigmarites.
What happened to you? You used to do anything for a coin and a full tankard. Are those days truly behind you, or is this just an act?
Is this it? Looks like it. We stared down the front doors of the primary building. They were made of brown wood, oak. I pressed my palm on the door, and gingerly I pushed it open. They began to creak as they went their full breadth across its hinges. A hallway was the first thing we saw. The corridor was lined on both sides with horrifyingly crafted stone gargoyles, which seemed to melt in and out of the very rock it was carved from. Each of them seemed to be almost too long to clutch and grasp at each of us. The door ahead shone with visible rune magic, and each of us were cautious to enter the corridor. Our entrance was slow and deliberate. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30, and as we reached the warded door on the other side of the hall, I felt a distinct feeling that I had waited too long. These things, these strange gargoyles, ripped themselves out of the wall. What was once solid had become a silverine mercury. The ones in the wall that hadn't leapt out had become filled and virile with life. One managed to grab Dundurl by the neck, considering his stature. Ursabet was caught in melee. Stone fingers went down her throat and prevented her from speaking. Elmariel attempted to cast a spell, and his eyes grew wide as it fizzled, the strange door preventing his casts. Jean-Paul, who had remained silent for our entire entrance, had become alight with fear and claustrophobia as the walls themselves tried to pull him in two. As they all screamed for each other, fighting off gargoyles and strangulation, the door lay before me, its wards shone with an unholy malice. I heard the dark and sonorous laughter, filled with iron and tin in the distance. I was reminded of my stay in the raptor's talon, and rage filled me. I drew my axe, and with a dreadful screech, I smashed the warded door in twain. The axe head was suddenly alight with my fury and rage, bright red and filled to the brim with magics. The brass figure on its throne nodded its approval in my head. "Come on, move! Move!" We all piled out of the hallway. Tawinel had already shadowed past us, contorting his body straight into the next room with an agility untold. Elmariel had managed to finally summon an animated sword, using it to hold off the gargoyles as we bypassed the halls. We all piled out of the hallway. Tawinel had already shadowed past us, contorting his body straight into the next room with an agility untold. Elmariel had finally managed to summon an animated sword, using it to hold off the gargoyles as we bypassed the halls. As the door was being thrown back, the gargoyles stared us down as they went back into the wall. All that was left were our heavily breathing forms in the next room. The hallway of gargoyles is usually the first major party filter. If the party remains within the hall for 3 rounds, or 30 seconds, the gargoyles will animate and attack the party. Their forms become fluid and they can twist and contort themselves in various ways to overcome length differentials. Breaking through the warded door to escape them is the best bet. The gargoyles will generate infinitely otherwise. The warded door can be dispelled, broken with sufficiently powerful magical items, or open with Rinaldian cleric spells. The small antechamber after the gargoyle corridor is described as magically warded if a character with the magical awareness skill passes an intelligence test. Unfortunately, a character who is unable to pass a willpower test simply cannot pass the ward, and takes a -20 to their weapon and ballistic skills, a big problem if characters are unable to break past the gargoyles or foolishly leave the door open behind them. This map displays the warded door with 4 possible directions, and the book actually encourages you to change up the layout across different runs. So while the warded door is described as door, singular, you can decide what route it actually takes. I actually neglected to notice this in my first time I ran this module, and as a result I actually had all 4 routes available to the players and got very confused. Going east from the warded door will lead to the waiting lounge, a place described as a dusty but plush room. Each of the armchairs within has a corpse seated. If examined, the corpses are delicately flayed with other tools such as scalpels and blunt spatulas being here as well. Despite being rather macabre, this place actually holds no danger to the party. By Farina. I gasped and whispered a prayer to the goddess of knowledge. What sort of horror did I bear witness to? Corpses, ancient and withered, were sitting at a long table, nothing but pieces of bone and ancient desiccated skin dust left in the shadows of their wake. Before them were plates of rotted food, and at the head of the feast hall lay an empty chair that filled me to the brim with chills. This was a scene mothers would scare their children with at night. Ursabet, Jean-Paul, and Heidi Kant were all just as shocked as I was, while our non-human companions could only marvel at the grisliness. These were the final days of Emperor Carolus II, lured in by constant Drachenfels and starved to death. If my human companions had any questions as to where they were, this scene had eliminated all doubt. We stared in silence for but a moment. Ursabet began to pray to Verena, while the rest of us lay in shock. Heidi finally spoke up. Emperor Carolus II, the stories were true. Emperor? Don't mind if I do. Tuino smiled with glee, and thanks to his elven swiftness, he had already reached one of the many bodies, his fingers pilfering it. Wait, no! Ursabet squealed, but it was too late. Her prayer was broken, and ghastly spirits gnawed themselves out of the corpse's bones, grabbing poor Tuino, who yelped in fear and terror and pain. Elmariel began chanting a spell, and I pulled out my axe. All of a sudden, my fears bled away, and the powers of the axe coursed through me. I charged the nearest spectre and struck it down with all my might, denting my weapon into the table it had risen from. Ursabet had thrown her hands outward. A zone of anti-undead formed, and she shouted a command for all to enter. Elmariel cast a fiery spell that blasted away the undead fiends, but for all our efforts, it was too late. As we retreated behind Elmariel's shield, the specters had taken the life of Tuino. As he fell to the ground, his skin was sallow, his eyes were white, and his soul was no more. The spirits, unable to assail us, retreated from whence they came.
All that for a few artifacts.
Dundurl shook his head, and Heidi looked to him in bemusement. Really, I thought you would be the one who'd go out like that. Dundurl snorted.
Yeah, you're right, Ungi. I was about to grab him before the Elgi did. Strange, though. Elgi are not normally known for such things.
It took us a while to actually check Tawino's corpse. Beyond the equipment of a bounty hunter, Tawino had knives, poisons, and most interestingly, a contract. A contract to find the killer of Emperor Carolus II and retrieve his equipment for the Imperial vaults. What a strange elf. What a strange contract. Rest in peace, I say. Going north from the warded door is the most famous room of all of Castle Drachenfels. Well, debatably. The Chamber of the Poison Feast is rarely explored by castle visitors due to both the vibes of the room and the hellish reputation it holds. This is where Drachenfels had engaged in an extremely long con against the Emperor and his family, and inevitably paralyzed them all with poison food, letting them watch Drachenfels stuff himself while the family starves to nothing. Given the ancient nobility of the family, a lot of loot can be generated here, around 500 gold. However, the ghosts of the dead will not be happy about this and will attack the party. Undead psychology rules apply here liberally, maybe even with a debuff considering the hellish scene. Going west from the warded door, a player can find the Great Hall. This is a place used for feasting, exhibitions, or whatever Drachenfels might use it for. Feast tables, fine china, excellent paintings, and more. Even though the scene is quite dark and macabre, there might be dust or bodies, it's actually quite a safe room, and a solid potential to provide resting opportunity for the players. Going north from the waiting lounge leads us to a north-south hallway that connects to the Chamber of the Poison Feast to the west, a new hall to the north, and a new room to the east. The eastward room is the lounge. Yes, it's different from the waiting lounge. This chamber is filled to the brim with clocks. All are in pieces, and the most likely location a player might find Bartle the Hunchback. We will get to him a little later. South of the Great Hall, you can find two auxiliary rooms. The cloak room has a hidden camellia leech within, waiting to ambush characters. Loose buttons and a silver shilling is available in here. The privy, much like the cloak room, is a needless auxiliary room with a low-tier ambushing enemy inside. That is, an amoeba. East from the Great Hall and north of the North-South Hall leads to an L-shaped hall that connects to 3 additional rooms in another hall to the north. This is known as the Corridor of Discord, filled to the brim with vicious monsters known as Moderators and... This is known as the Corridor of Discord, which appears to be longer than it actually is, designed to actually piss off players who like to make one-to-one grid maps as they explore dungeons. And no, that's not me joking like the last paragraph, I am being literal. The paintings in this hall look slightly different to everyone who looks upon it, and is designed to cause infighting between players due to these inconsistencies. Failed willpower checks will result in players infighting with each other, and sowing confusion amongst the group. Most importantly, this fighting creates noise, which can potentially draw wandering monsters, as well as waste time. The room to the northeast of the Corridor of Discord is the Study, a normally locked door with a specified key in a different part of the castle, specifically the attic, room 53. The lock can be picked and broken, however. The study contains a large number of papers, books, and a lectern. Most of the perishable items in here and the books and paper are completely destroyed, although with thorough searching, a player might accidentally cause the rickety bookshelf to fall on them with a failed dexterity check, also revealing a red mold enemy on the wall behind it. On the east wall of the study lies 5 masks, and each of these masks has a different effect, changing the player's skills and appearance to match that of the mask. The Iron Warrior improves the character's cool and willpower, but makes them frenzy against a random archetype of GM decision. The Silver Rogue is +10 to intelligence and +10 to all bluff, bribery, and any fellowship tests involving a con, but to a detriment of 1 toughness. The lead ogre is a flat -10 to intelligence. The copper fox gains concealment, rural and urban, silent move, rural and urban, or a 5 to any of these if the character already has them, with a -5 negative to the character's cool characteristic. The paper courtesan crumbles to dust when the wearer dons it, giving them its appearance and conferring the charm, mime, mimic, and seduction skills permanently. Bonuses from the mask are only effective when the mask is worn, with the exception of the paper mask, and negatives are permanent regardless and cannot be dispelled, a fact that shall make many players wary of what else remains in the dungeon. Kinda weird how all of these masks confer negatives, but there's one positive mask that makes you extremely attractive. Deeper in the study, then, you will find the library. Much like the study, the lock here is opened with the key found in the attic. However, unlike the study, this lock is magically reinforced, as well as the door. The wall is surrounded by stone, and given the castle's living nature, you can be assured it won't be blasted down either. You cannot pick the lock, nor can you smash it, magically disable it, or otherwise remove it. The attic key is the only thing that can open this place. There are 8 shelves in the library, containing specifically these subjects: archaeology, history, genealogy, mythology, medicine, Lustrian and New World exploration, the histories of chaos incursions, and a large number of books on various theologies as well as heresies on those theologies. A full minute of searching will reveal an alchemical work on the book De Lapis Philosophorum, as well as a magical and relatively important grimoire known as Lermontov's Grimoire. There are a number of traps here, including plate spike traps, as well as a blade trap that shoots scythes out of the wall. If the group attempts to take a book out of the library, they will be attacked by its guardian spirit, so most likely they will be fighting another ghost enemy here unless they copy the contents of the book into spare paper or an empty grimoire they might have. The northeast room in the Corridor of Discord leads to the heraldic display, a stone chamber listed with all the heraldries in the Empire, alongside various ornamental weapons are found here. Below each of these heraldries is a symbol of various chaos powers. Of course, the heraldic suits of armor will animate and attack the players. There is an incredibly powerful crossbow of strength here that does 5 base damage on hit, but on a roll of 96 to 100, the bow will fire backwards and automatically hit the marksman. Given that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st Edition determines damage by strength plus 1d6, having this incredibly powerful crossbow potentially hit you in the face with 11 damage can be horrifying, but equally so upon your enemies. The walls of this place, the Chamber of Temptation, are covered in hanging gore and viscera. Bodies lay everywhere, and victims, true to the room's name, have been killed by their passions. A glutton's body is overflowing with food, a miser lies dead to the cuts of 1,000 coins, a drunkard has drowned in his own massive bowl of brandy, and more, dependent on what horrors the GM can conceive. Those who fail a secret intelligence test here finds an object of their vice and finds themselves unable to resist walking over to that object of desire or devotion. In this, if they are not stopped, the characters are attacked by the bodies of the various victims in the room, or rather, by vile leeches that have taken up residence inside the bodies, controlling them and exploding outward, their chest cavities exploding in a mass of bone and rotted blood. The leeches wear the faces of the bodies they lived in, and each leech attacks whatever character is nearest. Witnessing this scene requires a cool test or a receival of D3 insanity points. Did you get it? Shh, Imperial. Navigating around the magic trap is, tricky. Jean-Paul had whispered a few words. A strange shimmer rose around his form, and his eyes closed in bits of pain. And then, with a push, he shoved himself forward. The doors opened with his form. As I approached the door, I, too, felt what he felt, a strange, wriggling feeling of inability and sudden weakness. I summoned all my strength, and then, with what felt like a supreme effort, I was able to push onwards. Throne room was one of the larger structures in the castle, and my eyes were almost immediately drawn to the north wall window, and realization placed itself firmly in my throat. The axe at my belt gave bits of fervent hum as I saw the figure, replete in full plate armor, surrounded by brass and blood. His strength was immediately, intimately familiar. The same strength that saved me from Mercaria Drawn, the same that had allowed me to break through the gargoyle door. I had, briefly, the thought to strike down the windowed effigy. This was a parody of the thing that had saved me, and it shouldn't, no, it shall not stand. The axe called to me. My hand gripped its shaft. I pulled it from my sheath. Dundurl's voice broke my trance, and I whirled around to find him on the other side of the room. He was already screeching bloody murder, using his hammer to demolish a shrine covered in the symbology of nude depictions and the wafting smell of cloying sweetness. The moment he had done so, however, we all froze. From the mist of his destructive ruin came forth an hourglass-shaped figure, with long hair and narrow eyes. Her skin was of a purplish pallor, and an ominous mutation sprouted from her back, a third arm and requisite claw snapping with every forward saunter. Dundurl's voice hung in his throat, and his eyes bulged out into the smoke.
You?
Ah, Dundurl, so happy to see you again. You know, we were just talking about you.
We?
Oh yes, your family and I. And such sweet delights we shared together. Dundurl's face grew red with rage. The grip on his hammer was shaking so hard I had feared it would shatter the length of its hilt. He started ranting and raging in Cazelid, which only seemed to inspire giggles in the Daemonette. She never even resisted the blow. He smashed her head in with a warhammer. Demonic juices flew in every direction. Even Heidi's face contorted in complete disgust as we witnessed the scene, Dundurl's warhammer smashing the Daemonette's corpse again and again, echoes of laughter ringing across the halls, and the cries of Dundurl's family spun around me in small, audible strands. When Dundurl was finally done, there was nothing left. Nothing of the shrine, nor the Daemonette, nor the sounds of a family lost. He looked back to our shocked faces with tears streaming down his eyes.
Not a word. Not a...
And then, Dundurl screamed. The Daemonette had simply reappeared and shoved her claw through his chest. It exploded in a shower of blood. Ursabet and Amariel both screamed spells of power, and the Daemonette was reduced to nothingness, but not before leaving her vile laughter to the four winds. As he choked on his own blood, he managed a tiny sentence.
Fegwid, forgive me.
He died right there, on the floor. Iron laughter echoed the halls of my head, and I felt nothing but the cold chill of the castle walls. Finally, the westward room of the Corridor of Despair leads to the throne room, the personal resting spot that Castle Drachenfels would use in order to watch his victims die, spy upon the world, and taunt the Chaos Gods themselves. Of course, Drac himself is deeper below in the castle, but this throne room should certainly throw the players off edge. On the east wall lies a glass-stained window depicting corn, and should a player manage to break it after several attempts and demons spawning to stop them, they could accidentally TPK everyone in the room by summoning a cornet bloodthirster. The throne itself is covered and bound in thick satin curtains lined with ornate gold. The curtains that surround the throne and the wall are covered with Drachenfels' various victories, and there, if looked upon, become so distressing it requires a willpower test to resist an insanity point gain. If a character were foolish enough to actually sit on the throne, it would shoot tentacles that grasp the character across their arms and legs, binding them and squeezing them against it. The throne has an extremely high miss rate due to the size of the tentacles and the wriggling of the character, and will crush the character for D3 wounds a turn. Further, the throne will emit a Cause Cowardly Flight spell, replete with a horrifying face to screech the words of said spell. You may also destroy the throne itself, but doing so will release a Fetid Cloud spell automatically. Either way, don't mess with the throne. The south side of the wall contains a number of chaos effigies and shrines, and if a character messes with these, they risk summoning an evil-aligned or chaos-aligned lesser demon or godly servant where applicable by GM's discretion. A cleric of an order-aligned god will actually be able to cleanse these sites, in which the GM is encouraged to bless the cleric or the party instead. A harpy's cage and resulting harpy rattles behind these, screaming in eternal starvation as she is cursed to live forever without food. If the party takes pity on her and opens the cage, then she will attack without mercy. The west wall here has a number of curios and other such things. A one-handed clock that moves backwards, a pipe rack of fused vertebrae, and more. To the west room of the Great Hall lies the kitchens. Here is a room of genuine oddity, and as a GM, I suggest you play it up. The room not only has a pile of unfortunately piled up excrement, as Bartle, one of the castle caretakers and NPCs, has begun pooping in the vents again. This is not a joke. But it also has 2 zombies protected by a zone spell. Instead of being hostile, their bodies regrow and transform into people the players know and care about. These transfigured zombies, or perhaps through the power of constant Drachenfels, some of the player characters' actual loved ones, begin to rip out their own intestines. Disbelief will be written on their faces as they plead to the PCs for help. If too close, the characters must make an initiative test in order to avoid the splattering of blood and guts. If they fail, a cool test is required in order not to vomit and disrobe the blood and guts of their loved ones. Finally, when the scene ends and the zombies have destroyed themselves, their heads will continue to gnash at the party, albeit relatively harmlessly. Another cool check for insanity is taken here. Here you can find the larder to the kitchens. It's much more simple. There's nothing but rotten perishables and a few giant rats if the party searches thoroughly. The northwest room to the Great Hall is the music room. Black-lined curtains cover the walls. Strange, ancient, or otherwise foreign instruments line the room, and an armchair is to face them. If the group interacts with the instruments, they'll be attacked by 2 guardian spirits, although these spirits will not pursue the group unless they steal one of the instruments. If a fight occurs within the music room, the instruments will begin to play themselves, causing an awful, magical, and discordant sound, requiring a willpower check at the potential loss of 10 to leadership, cool, and willpower. Each instrument can be sold for 200 gold coins, but only if a proper collector is found. The hallway north to the L hallway is one of the castle's many warp passages. These are functionally portals that the castle, or the GM, can use to create intersected passageways, especially if you're running with the idea that the castle's rooms are a bit more dynamic. This passage can lead to a number of rooms, but the warp hallway itself is covered in a plush red carpet, fine wood floors, recessed oil lamps, and paintings. If you bypass the warp passage safely, or if you manage to come here through an NPC guide, such as Bartle the Hunchback, the resident vent shitter, you will find yourself in the master bedroom. This chamber is described as large and was beautifully decorated, although age has perforated the room. Of course, the most enchanting thing about the room is the bed. If the group lays on the bed, or foolishly approaches it, the bed will enchant and transform into one of the most silly and Drachenfelian enemies in this castle, the Killer Bed. The curtains use wind blast spells, and the bed itself can smash and choke adventurers. Destroying the bed yields some solid fur in loot alongside a number of potentially magical loot items, from crystals, bloodstones, and pink corals. From here, you can go up the stairs to reach the attic, another room which does contain a key ring with many useful keys. To the west of the master bedroom lies the bath chamber. Beyond a bathrobe of toughness here, there is not much to find. To the west of the warp passage hall is yet another warp passage. If the characters have a guide, they can walk through the passage to get to the basement of the Tower of Rage. This can be used as a quick exit or an unfortunate trap if the players are stumbling. Other alternatives include an additional warp passage that leads the group to an upper floor of the castle, leading directly to the various alignment rooms of that floor, which Bartle, assuming the group befriended him, is decidedly too scared to enter. Speaking of...
The Grey Seer saw your truth when he took your eye, didn't he?
This section on the ground floor of the castle can only be reached by the warp passage if the players use it to not head upstairs or escape through the Tower of Rage. Bartle can potentially lead the players to this line of rooms, but it will be highly hesitant to actually enter them himself. The so-called Chamber of Light and Good is actually rather nice looking, magically illuminated to look as if the sun is bearing down in the room. Fine dessert wines and sweet biscuits are on silver trays. Characters not of good alignment suffer a -5 to all tests in this room. Shortly after entering, the party will be approached by 3 elven ghosts. Having been trapped inside the castle, they try to stop the party from going any further. Unlike other specters, these ghosts can cast magic, although the ghosts don't necessarily want to fight unless the party forces them to do so. A particularly good aligned party with a solid fel spread should be able to talk their way past. Even if a fight does break out, the ghosts will do their best to avoid killing or causing critical wounds, seeing the fight less as something to the death and more as a deterrent to prove to the party that they aren't ready for what the castle has in store for them. Either way, once the party deals with the ghosts, they are free to continue, and if they open the door to the next chamber, the ghosts will simply wisp away, much like my father wisping away out of the Americas into the Philippines. God, I miss him. This room is colored in lilac and contains similar decor as the previous room, except with a darker and more shadowy bend. The Chamber of Darkness and Chaos, so named, sees non-chaos aligned party members receiving a -5 to all tests here. 2 daemonettes of Slaanesh lounge in the room, inviting adventurers to join in for various excesses and debaucheries. A small incense burner gives off a cloying musk that reduces characters' initiative by 10, and a willpower check is required to avoid being charmed by these dangerous demons of lust. If they manage to successfully lure a victim, that character is surprised for the first round of resulting combat. The daemonettes will fight viciously if the party tries to leave the room and into the next chamber, but won't enter the next chamber themselves. The Chamber of Light and Law, much like the previous 2, has similar decor but is pure white. Non-law aligned characters receive that -5 penalty that we're all familiar with. Standing at the far end of the room is a man in plate armor and a rune-inscribed bastard sword. He looks like this. No, I'm not joking. In any case, this is Thaddeus Schnelling, a witch hunter of Sulcan. Considering the fact that Sulcan is a god of law, it's important to note that he will probably attack the party if they aren't lawful as well, but the party could definitely do some solid convincing to trick him otherwise. He does not realize that he is actually a summon in this room, and believes he is mid-expedition with his group of law-aligned witch hunters, all of whom perished apart from Thaddeus himself. Thaddeus can actually temporarily aid the party, but he will more or less despawn if they enter the next room. If the party re-enters the Room of Law, Thaddeus will reappear, but acts as if the party had never met him before. He is, unfortunately, stuck in a reality loop. Much like the other chambers, the Chamber of Darkness and Evil has similar decor and is for evil-aligned characters. Unlike the previous rooms, however, this room is populated by castle explorers specifically. Maximilian von Steinhoff and Julian Fassbender, a vampire and his thrall, are in the room. The moment the party enters the room, Max will awaken out of his vampiric torpor, while Julian will try and stall or bluff the party by informing them of a ritual that is the party's only method out of the room. Julian might come up with a number of stories based on GM preference, but unless the party are the types to serve as vampires without a care for their well-being, most likely, these negotiations will all be deception. If Max and Julie complete the ritual, the party will be in for a rough fight. Smart players will attack immediately, subdue Julie, and stake Max. Assuming the ritual is completed, the room will become showered in blood, and a massive wave of it will crash towards the party. The blood is magical, hot, and corrosive. Anyone inside the wave will take 1 wound per round and must make a toughness test to act, otherwise they will be stunned by the pain. Of course, Max and Julie, being vampiric in nature, are immune to the blood themselves and will attack the adventurers. However, there is a silver lining to allowing the ritual to complete. It creates a portal that leads the party to the Great Tower. If the party didn't have Bartle as a companion, this might have been the only other method to bypass the warp passages beyond a warp torch. Although, of course, the original alignment room needs to be traversed to via a warp passage as well, so a bit of trial and error is involved to even get to this point. The adventurers may also complete the ritual themselves if they kill or otherwise drive back the vampires in order to create a portal out of the room. The ritual is powerful enough in such a room that it cannot be dispelled naturally with magic.
They trust you. They don't see your weakness, your shame. They will. You won't be able to help yourself, and no song will hide that truth.
If you were to take Warp Passage, room 33, the hallway of the first floor is a place you might be coming across, assuming you have a competent guide, luck, or some ability to guide you through such places. In any case, the hallway has a number of rooms which we shall now go over. Assuming they're looking down the east-west hall, the first room on the left is the room of Bartle the Hunchback, a rather humble room manned by the castle's resident dwarf caretaker, or perhaps a place of respite if the party had befriended him and is using him as a guide for the warp passages. A number of broken clocks reside here, indicating that Bartle does still retain some of his dwarfish tendencies, although his love for his master, Castle Drachenfels, only implies that some horror must have befallen him to engage in such rampant Stockholm syndrome. In any case, this is a common place. He will bring the adventurers to talk properly alongside some of his famous Lustrian coffee. Considering Bartle's diarrhea in the vents, it might not be a good idea to drink this. The next room over is the Slough. A word of forbiddance is inscribed upon the door, requiring a magical disruption or willpower check to bypass. If accompanied by Bartle, he will comment that the room should not be entered. The walls and the door are used to safely dispose of magic, so as long as they remain outside the room, they shall be safe. I assume that this is also the room to discard magical anomalies, demons, or whatever else the castle or its inhabitants have inadvertently created with their experiments. If the characters open the door, they come across a whirling vortex of buff-colored smoke, and the smell of bile will fill their nostrils. Functionally, they see like the Flying Dutchman zipper from SpongeBob.
Oh, what is this, some kind of magic act?
If a player is stupid enough to enter the death room, they are killed instantly, or they spend a fate point, I suppose, and are blasted out of the room. Frankly, I have no idea why this room exists from a game design perspective. It is quite literally a room that just kills you. To the next room over, this is the room that Bartle uses to store various goods he has picked up over the years. There are potentially useful items in this room as they were taken from dead adventurers, beasts, and such machinations. The useful items are a pair of storm lanterns, 192 pints of oil, boxes of dried fruits that can last the party for 30 days, a broken magnifying glass, and 6 water skins. You may also roll to find other items of use here based on the scarcity rating of the item. Of course, the party may bully Bartle into handing over whatever they need, but Bartle's friendship is key to navigating the warp passages or discovering pertinent information about the castle and its rooms, such as, for example, the Slough, and that it just kills you. The second final room to the south side of the east-west hall lies the kitchen and the privy. This is where Bartle cooks his meals, drinks his Lustrian coffee in sealed tins, and does his business in the vents. That lands in the kitchens on the ground floor where the zombies cut themselves to the horror of the players. There's a half-eaten roast rat in an oven tray here, so Bartle will eat almost anything. A dwarf acting so non-dwarfishly is again another sign of horrors that was unfortunately enacted upon this pitiable creature. The final chamber on the south side here is the room of Stanislav Goeth, a scholar. He's a spirit who retains much of his personality in life, that of a grumpy, obstinate, but knowledgeable old man. He believes the current year is 2464, a half-century in the past. The party will have to be careful in their dealings with Stanislav, and a fight might break out if they fail to bluff their way into convincing him that the group are friends of Drachenfels. However, if they manage to befriend the ghost, a lot of useful information about the castle can be gleaned, especially if the party had treated Bartle poorly or don't have access to him. There are also old ledgers here that implicate old families of the Empire in some incredibly serious and dark crimes. If the party manages to decode these ledgers, they will be able to blackmail, turn in, or otherwise deal with said families in later adventures. The book actually says this. You know, in my games, there's a sort of family tradition. Within the first 5 sessions of every Warhammer campaign I have ever run, a child has been murdered, usually alongside his family. You may feel bad for the fictional child, but I wouldn't. As we all know, Ulricans are not people. The chambers to the north of the hall are exceedingly dangerous, with more than a few adventurers having met their doom in these rooms. These are pockets of the chaos wastes that exist within the castle. Drachenfels has a chamber in his great tower that allows him to watch the party struggle if they enter the rooms of the Bonefield, the Meadow of Crassus, the Miasmic Marsh, or the Ethereal Wood, each clearly dedicated to one of the chaos gods. The Bonefield, then, is of corn, filled to the brim with bones, obviously. Oh, and a skeletal dinosaur. And bloodletters, which continue to spawn after the party has encountered said dinosaur. They won't pursue the party if they manage to escape the room, however. Unfortunately for the party, any who enter the Bonefield may not exit via the south door that leads back to the hall, and those who have entered here will not do so under Bartle's recommendation. He, of course, will never enter rooms like these unless forced to by an evil party. The next room the party escapes to, then, is the Meadow of Crassus. Obviously that of Slaanesh, this place is covered in flesh-colored grass. Grass? No, of course, what am I saying? This place is filled with slender, lush fingers that grab you and fondle you. Because of course they do. What, do you expect me to react with some sort of disgust? I'm sorry. You chose to play Castle Drachenfels, and you're getting fingered, dumbass. Getting fingered inside a pocket realm of Slaanesh is based, actually. Characters who walk through here suffer a penalty to cool, willpower, weapon skill, and ballistic skill alongside a movement penalty. Sometimes, hiding amongst these fingers is a sudden hand. These hands will wrestle and entangle a wandering player, requiring them to wrestle out of the hands as well as deal with oncoming demonettes, modified with improved speed and elastic limbs to reach the party from range. Much like the other Chaos rooms, escape is preferential to combative victory. In the distance, the players can also see the next room, an arch of yellow and green. The marsh is honestly the most chill place here. It's mainly just a gross swamp with a bunch of disease checks. As usual, Grandpapa Nurgle is decidedly kind. The longer the group takes, the higher the risk of a disease check, and the marsh hampers movement significantly, with minor penalties to initiative and cool. Thorough washing after the marsh will end any negatives the marsh provides, not including diseases gained, of course. And then one last arch remains. The faces of the semi-ethereal trees moaned in pain. The winds blew with an extreme force. Already we were tired, haggard, and covered in cuts, marred by fear and filled with fatigue. We looked behind us and saw the blowing winds. We saw the trees scream and die, and we saw the twilight of twilight, the ever-changing trees of an eternal realm, shifting the surface of this very place. A single figure barred our passage, his armor brimming with Tzeentchian fury, and as the twilight shift pressed against our backs, I knew we would find our end within if we failed to escape. And so we charged. Ursabet sent a prayer forward. Jean-Paul and Heidi went on the offense, and I blitzed past with my axe, holding it in defense to the side. Amariel, however, couldn't move with us. His eyes were on the warrior's blade, and he shook his head in pure terror. No, not that. Anything but that. The sword, Ursabet realized and spoke out first. The sword is enchanting him. But it was too late. The shifting moonlight reached him, and he screamed. Amariel was transfigured into many of the wilting trees, and as we managed to push past the armored figure, with Heidi and Jean-Paul occupying him, we escaped the shifting twilight. The warrior simply looked back at us from the changing moonlight, himself unaffected, and laughed as we escaped into the next arch. As we escaped, however, Amariel stood. Unbound by the twilight, sweat covered his face. The long shadows of the hall darkened him. Our questions were met only with confusion, and I could only surmise that it was fate, the will of the gods, that he survived. Going through the final arch here, we'll see the players enter the ethereal wood. The trees here are bleached, semi-ethereal, and contain the faces of those who perished here. A cold wind blows through, giving penalties to multiple stats if the players fail a cool check. After a few moments, the gray forest will start to expand. If the forest and the resulting light expands into a player, They will join the faces among the trees forevermore, another soul damned to Drachenfels' castle. To complicate matters, a Tzeentchian champion remains here to challenge the party, demanding a soul. If the players comply and give him a hireling or player soul, that NPC or PC will die instantly in some brutish fashion the GM can come up with. Otherwise, they can run, fight, or do a bit of both, each with their own positives and negatives. The champion himself has an interesting anti-elf weapon that prevents the passage of elves, alongside a magic destroyer sword that the party can certainly use later on if they manage to take it from him. Either way, it will be a hard fight, because it has to be done quickly. In any case, if the party escapes here, they will find themselves back in the hall, probably much worse for wear after engaging with all the chaos rooms. Instead of going through the warp passage, the group can instead go through the stairs in the master bedroom. This will lead to the attic and the clock, which has a number of strange types of clutter. An abacus that uses human parts, a rocking horse with a semi-skeletal head, wooden toy soldiers that have chaos mutations. The real treasure and danger, however, is the cuckoo clock. Around it is a set of keys that characters will need to progress in certain areas of the castle, such as the library. The clock has a number of incredibly bizarre powers and effects, such as cloning images of itself or turning players into a cuckoo. Add that to the tags, transformation kink. If the clock chimes, the other objects, such as the toy soldiers, might also come to life, attacking the party by biting and stabbing at their ankles and sides. The only way to stop the endless barrage is, of course, to destroy the clock. There is another warp passage here that can serve as a connecting point with the warp passage downstairs. If the group used the Room of Darkness and Evil and the resulting ritual within, they will find themselves in this tower. A d6 is rolled for each character, and the character has a random chance of spawning in various places around the tower, potentially out of position for an ambush. The walls are inlaid with archways of various portals, and the spiral stairs will lead the group into the dungeons. A large wooden door sits at the north of the tower, which leads to a warp passage that always puts the adventurers back into the attic room, thus providing a method to get back to the ground floor, and to get those keys. There is a throne in this tower, capable of magically moving around the room if Drachenfels commands it, allowing him to view whichever of the portals he wants to spy on the party or other intruders. However, Drachenfels himself is nowhere to be found here. Instead, a daemonette is tied to the chair, but she has been modified to look more human and beautiful than other daemonettes. If the party investigates, they will discover that she has been forcibly turned to become Drachenfels' concubine, who then attacks the nearest party member. The party must make an initiative test or be surprised. Once they defeat the concubine, they can inspect the portals if they wish. Each of these portals lead to one of the chaos rooms on the first floor of the castle. But the portal is one way. The arches also depict some areas in the dungeons, as well as random far-off lands. If the party are worse for wear and wish to bank their loot, they can theoretically use one of these arches to escape the clutches of Drachenfels, or push themselves deeper into a dungeon area, of course, at the risk of being out of position, surprised, or hopelessly lost. Going up the spiral staircase instead of down will lead to the Whisperers. The scene is partly illusory, and an intelligence test is needed in order to discern the real from the not. The windows with requisite light from outside, alongside curtains and the patterns of the floor, are all illusory. The furniture appears luxurious and inviting. In the center of the room sit two strange figures. Strange, wizened old creatures that play chess against each other with pieces of iconography that depict various chaos entities. They don't attack on sight, but they do continue to play their chess game on the player's entrance. The party can converse with them, and if they do so enough, they will tell them that they are the Oracle's servants, the Oracle being someone who lives upstairs, and you can only see the Oracle if he has invited you, and finally that they live downstairs from the Oracle, and so on. These creatures will run on this monotonous, strange, and circular logic and will not relent. If the party tries to see the Oracle, the creatures will try to attack them. It is possible to trick these homunculi in a sort of robotic loop, but a particularly intelligent and charismatic character would be required to do so. The Oracle's chamber is decorated in black and midnight blue. An 8-yard diameter around the oracle's throne is thick slime that appears to be almost spider silk-like. Various items associated with Heaven's magic and potentially Tzeentch magic, such as charts, crystal balls, and deep blues, permeate the room. The oracle himself appears to be a man of impossibly advanced age. The party will be able to clearly see the outlines of his internal organs pressing against his skin, so weak and frail he will appear to be. He has a scabrous, hairless scalp. His fetid mouth is black with rot, and his tongue is forked. A constant slimy mucus leaves the pores of his body, which is what, presumably, forms the slime of the room. The oracle can be conversed with. If asked about himself, he will be rather vague, beyond his abilities as a seer and a servant to Drachenfels. If you are running a module where Drachenfels is coming back, such as Drachenfels Lives, the oracle will remark that the master is growing stronger, and he gives bits of ecstatic claps and moans of pleasure at the idea. The adventurers can each ask a question of the oracle before he will dismiss them. Each question must require a relevant fellowship test, and once a character fails, that character will be refused further questions, having pissed him off. If the characters please the oracle, he will actually begin to remark on Drachenfels' great deeds. Like every other NPC in the castle, they will never refer to Drachenfels by name, only as the Master. Much like the homunculi playing chess, however, the oracle will refuse the characters further passage unless they kill him or bluff their way past. Ascending past the oracle is the trapped stairwell. It's important to note that the stairs here are not actually inhabiting a physical space of the tower. Indeed, the group, if choosing to walk on the stairs, have unknowingly entered a portal to a different place entirely. The set of stairs here are highly narrow and must be traversed in single file. The stairs lead to a door about 20 feet above the party. If the party passes the door, it locks behind them instantly. It cannot be unlocked and can only be damaged by magical weapons and spells. Wedging it open could be useful as well before it locks itself. While the adventurers are halfway up through the stairs, the rail turns into a snake-like construct made of teeth, and the stairway turns into a sheer slope, requiring an initiative test to brace oneself to avoid falling. Of course, if a character at the front fails his initiative test, the ones behind him get knocked down as well. If the adventurers all fall and pile on top of the magically locked door, a horrible churning sound rises. They must find a way to escape, whether this be by destroying the door behind them, using flight or scale sheer surface, grappling hooks, whatever the party can come up with to ascend or descend. Whatever happens, the upper door bursts forth, and a strange yellow-green mucus appears, which requires the group to run an additional initiative test. If the characters are below 8 feet, they will begin to drown in the mucus, but if they are above, they can breathe, although slipping and falling becomes a hell on its own. A successful initiative test allows a character to ascend d4 feet per round. Failure means a slip in falling d6 plus 1 feet. The mucus itself can disease characters with galloping consumption, with 3 ascending disease checks, each increasing the chance to give a character a disease. If the party manages to bypass the dangers of the mucus, they shall reach the very top of the tower. Blackstone excrescences take the form of a rib cage projecting from a central spine, which grows up the north side of the room and arches up to the center of the ceiling. Odd feathery growths dot the Blackstone, like clusters of shavings on a magnet. Thick black veins spread across the ceiling, hanging roughly 10 feet above the floor. Hanging across a veiny cord in the center of the room is a black shard, which, if destroyed, will make the oracle and other such hostiles in the tower, such as the mucus, disappear or otherwise become docile. However, those with a magical sense, or having had a careful conversation with previous castle inhabitants, will let them know that the weather vane at the top of the tower is the true prize. If the group tries to climb the great tower from here, via a window, they will find themselves looking up at a weather vane depicting a satyr-like individual. The weather vane can be removed by unscrewing it, but this can be dangerous. The moment a person does so, dark clouds boil in the sky and lightning crackles. The carrier of the vane will be targeted by lightning bolts every 2 rounds, and if he's struck while climbing, he will fall to his death. Perhaps most dangerously, 3 turns after the weather vane is removed, it will shatter, automatically dealing 4 wounds. Then out of the shards, a fiend appears, a unique demon of Drachenfelian origin, a satyr-like demon that I personally imagine to have the look of a chort or fiend from The Witcher, replete with hypno powers, and I call it master, and I suck its massive cloven hooves, and if the fiend sees any of the adventurers, it attacks immediately, and it will be a hell of a fight.
You are damned by your own hand, little elf. You are proud. You belong to the darkness, to the dark gods.
If one were to descend the stairs from the portal room, they would find themselves in another portal. Indeed, while logically the stairs would lead to the throne room, which have no stairs, these stairs will lead the party to the dungeons, thanks to yet another magical portal. This is the landing of the dungeon, and will serve as a safe room of sorts. We shall be going clockwise for the purposes of room exploration, so let's proceed to the north hallway and see what rooms a party might encounter. This tiny theater features a show of puppets, which spring to life the moment anyone enters the room. These puppets do indeed put on a grand show of entertainments, acting scenes that are personal to the adventurers. The dialogue grows more sarcastic and malicious as the show goes on. And while the book doesn't explicitly say this, I would also place taunts regarding the player's out-of-castle exploits and adventures where applicable, which eventually moves on to thinly veiled taunts towards the character's loved ones or things they care about, but this will be gradual. The puppets might also accidentally reveal information in such a way, such as laughing how they failed to notice the weather vane or finding a guide through the warp passages. Eventually, the puppets will attack the players if the player takes the insults on the chin. If the players boo on the performance, they will also be attacked. However, if the players manage to impressively heckle the puppets, they will actually gain their respect and provide the party a major clue based on their current objectives. Doing this method will also net additional experience points at the end of the session. Also, there's a power that the Puppet Master uses on a party member to turn them into a marionette and mess with their movements for a -20 negative, which is, interesting. This door is protected by you guessed it, a Ward of Forbiddance, and a secondary spell known as Steel Mind. Assuming the party bypasses these, they will find themselves in an alchemical laboratory. Most of the equipment here is broken, however, there are 14 bottles sealed and potentially still useful. 11 of these potions are spoiled, and gives nothing but stomach pains for d6 times 10 turns. There are 3 usable potions here, potions of healing, disguise, and strength. If a character drinks the healing potion, they have to resist falling into a comatose sleep for 3d10 hours, and they cannot be woken up during said time. The party might also find some oil burners here and a bookshelf containing a number of books, but most notably, the Rudiments of Alchemy, allowing a character to learn alchemy skills, and the Ascension to Lichdom, a book that actually delivers the reader D3 insanity points, but also gives them the knowledge to actually become a lich. If a successful initiative test is made, a perceptive character can find hidden notes in a Telean genealogy volume that details potion recipes for a potion of fortitude as well as a potion of toughness. They might also use this room to search for various loots, which have a rough 50% chance of success. Usually, these will be alchemical reagents worth d10 plus 10 gold coins. However, if they stay too long, they might be attacked by a wandering ghoul or two that traverses the dungeons. The next room over is where Drachenfels engaged with the majority of his demonology experiments. This room wasn't used for actual summoning, but instead the research of said spells, and the room itself is damaging to the very mind. Wall hangings and tapestries are about the room, behind tables and apparati that depict Drachenfels using these demons for abhorrent experiments. Disturbingly, these tapestries depict themselves in unique ways to adventurers. Each party member will see something that is particularly disturbing and personal to themselves in the tapestries. Beyond this, the loot here, amongst the tapestries, paintings, and various lab items, can net the party some solid gold. As for the actual experimental items, we have a human skull that, with sufficient investigation, will show that it is a skull of a Nurgle Chaos Warrior, a key ingredient in a Bind Demon spell. 6 spell jars full of human and human-sized hearts. One jar has 11 human hearts, another 9 dwarven hearts, and the others all have human hearts that total up to 62. All of these can be used as spell ingredients for demonology spells. 4 jars containing human brains. 2 are preserved in clear liquid. Each of these brains are from good aligned clerics, useful for dispelling greater demons. 3 silver-banded, blue-fluted bottles. Each contains a pint of demon ichor. 2 of the bottles are inscribed with Tzeentch runes, and the third a rune of Slaanesh. Finally, there is a pentagram of solid gold, wrapped in black silk. Its value is a whopping 600 gold. It is the material ingredient for the Zone of Demonic Protection. If a character picks this pentagram up, the Zone of Demonic Protection it is being used for will suddenly break, and it is revealed that the entire room is one giant demon. It will now proceed to attack the party. The room comes alive with teeth and claws, and it basically becomes a monster house situation. The room may attack each character d2 times per round. It is most likely in the adventurer's best interest to run out of here, but fighting it is possible, but only with magical items and spells. A Dispel Greater Demon spell, perhaps by using the Cleric Brains as ingredients, will also instantly win the fight. If the party kills the demon room by another method via spells and items, the room will release a fetid cloud on its death. The Books of Flesh is a room containing bizarre and strange magical items. Troughs are everywhere in this room, and each is filled with stinking, rancid yellow fat. The stench is awful. If the players open the door to this zone, the floor between the doors of the Junior Magister's room and the Chamber of Fungi turns into a pit trap, damage being d6 plus 1 wounds. So entering this room prematurely can cause some damage to players later on. So a character adept at finding and disarming traps might be useful here. Elsewise, traversal through the halls would require climbing checks and equipment. Particularly, the group can find some books of flesh here, bound in pale and supple leather. 2 of these books are spell grimoires, written in some ancient, primal, and strange language. A successful intelligence test allows the user to memorize one randomly determined spell in the grimoire, and only 1 spell can be learned per day via this method. The first Book of Flesh contains battle magic spells, while the second contains elemental magic spells. The third Book of Flesh is actually a Slaaneshi tome, and details the enhancing of one's combat senses. Anyone who has read the book and holds it in their possession will receive a +10 bonus to their weapon skill and ballistic skill as long as the book is touching their bare skin. The book itself seems to delight in combat, squirming with pleasure and moaning uncomfortably with every strike made. If the party member in question ever gets their willpower lowered significantly, the book will engage in mental combat with the wielder, attempting to convert them into a chaotic Slaaneshi alignment. The fourth book, then, has the design of a sword on its cover, and it can create an animate sword spell when the wielder gets wounded in combat by a melee or missile attack. The effect persists until the wielder or his attackers are slain or are otherwise mortally wounded. The moment the group enters the room of the torture chamber, a skeletal torturer stands before them. "Ah, you have brought someone for me," he asks, and holds a hot branding iron. The undead torturer, one Friedrich Bremer, has long awaited his next victim. The adventurers might be able to talk their way past him, but if Friedrich desires a victim, and if one isn't given, then combat will likely begin. The room itself is filled to the brim with torture equipment, but it isn't dirty or rusted. All of it is polished, clean, and sharp. A constantly burning, magical brazier sits in the corner and has a number of those hot iron brands in it. Right next to the brazier is a marble slab of iron, which is sufficient to support a victim, alongside a tray of scalpels, thumb screws, bone-crunching implements, pincers, and similar tools. A torturer's paradise can be found here, and the GMs are free to improvise other tools. The cells inside the torture chamber are what you'd expect for the most part. The first room, Room A, is actually a living space for the undead torturer, and he likes to collect a number of curios and trophies from his victims. Body parts, jars, and bones are on display. He also keeps his victims' loot here, a total of 84 gold coins, 115 silver shillings, and 132 brass pennies in a coin box. The other cells are empty and clean, much like the primary room. Hidden in a crack in the stonework in cell D is a small silver signet ring with the symbol of Verena written upon it. Any cleric or worshipper of Verena would take great hatred of this. Much what it says on the tin, this place is a magical storeroom. It is protected by a set of magical doorknobs that say, "You aren't allowed in here," with a slow and sonorous wait. The door will refuse access to anyone who isn't the master, although the door could be deceived by a particularly witty character. However, the book does specify the door can only be convinced by a druidic priest. I am unsure as to why this is. The storeroom contains a suit of plate armor that will animate and attack the party. There are also several usable magical items. A suit of Cornet Chaos armor that animates and attacks, a black robe with a monogrammed D, a black wand that can fire 31 arrows of weakness, and a cursed box of jewelry which debuffs the wielder's cool by 20. Only a blessing from a deity the victim devoutly follows, a fate point, or a powerful enough dispel magic of 4th level can be used to actually remove the cursed effect once engaged, although I personally would also allow a black shard destruction. Other items include a liver that functions as an energy jewel for some extra magic points, something very much needed for priests and mages. There's an enchanted rope that takes the form of intestines, a puzzle involving 5 interlocked gold rings. A party can destroy 3 of the rings in order to acquire the other 2, functionally giving them at least 2 potentially interesting boons. The rings all give protection over one type of creature in this order: ethereal, undead, non-ethereal undead, 2 Skaven rings, and followers and creatures of Khorne. There's a knife sharpener here which can be used on an item to make it magical. However, this effect only happens once. All in all, while the animated armors can be pretty dangerous and the door requires a certain character archetype, there are plenty of rewards to be gleaned here, perhaps even the armors themselves if sufficiently dealt with. Much in line with the theme, this room has a number of surgical instruments, preserved body parts, anatomical diagrams, and other such things. In the southwest corner of the room lies a desk bearing similar items, and the slumped form of a mutant is clearly visible. The mutant is clothed in a moist sack. His skin is covered by green scales. He is essentially comatose, with slow and ragged breathing. Even a non-medical aligned character would be able to see this man probably doesn't have too much time left. The desk itself has an ornate bronze lamp which breathes a strange, possibly magical purple radiance. The mutant will awake autonomously in D10 plus 10 rounds, although he takes an additional 10 rounds to come to his senses fully. His name is Gerd Buchwald, and the party's mere presence will terrify him. Of course, like every other castle inhabitant, he will be hostile if he detects the party as hostile to Castle Drachenfels, but otherwise will actually be willing to talk at length with the party. Gerd here can be used by a careful party to learn key information on rooms in the dungeons, and to avoid metaphorical pitfalls, literal pitfalls, and other such dangers. After D6 plus 6 turns, however, Gerd begins to complain that he is hungry. If the adventurers give him some food, he will gulp it down greedily and with an incredible quickness, as if he were starving to death. Then he begins to cough. It grows in audio more and more, his body giving into distress audibly. Then he collapses on the ground, clutching his chest and his back arches. Gerd is killed instantly by the Render, a parasite that had ripped itself out of his back, and a fight with it begins. A number of fungi is growing through here, altered and magically warped by the dark saturation of the castle. When the characters enter, they only see rows of dried-out compost beds along the floor in half-rotted wood troughs. Mold covers the walls and the floor. The fungi themselves will animate and attack the party once almost everyone enters the room. The fungi are specifically dangerous because their criticals can instantly kill a player by infecting their insides with spores. Any body left in this room will be digested by the fungi over a period of 24 hours, including the player's equipment. The chamber here is similar to the alchemical lab, but nothing is broken. Mainly untouched and covered in spider webs. Virtually all the bottles here are blue and opaque glass. A character with herb lore, manufacture drugs, or prepare poisons will be able to determine the function of the room. The ingredients here are decayed and useless. Here, trollbane and graveroot can be found, poisons that function well against trolls and the undead. However, a skill check is required to identify them, as the labels have long since fell apart. The door that leads to the main corridor here is unnaturally tough, having 7 toughness and a durability of 16. Each of the doors across the cells has a barred grille which allows the party to see into each cell if they manage to breach this initial door. The prisoners here are kept magically alive, but not necessarily sentient or well-kept. Each of them are experiencing a particular torment in perpetuity, whether it be the natural causes of time, such as eternal starvation and dehydration, but it could also be other horrors. The prisoners are as follows. An ogre kept in perpetual starvation, trying to reach a cut of reanimated meat that has the capacity to feel fear and contains the joint faces of multiple humans. An orc, moaning and naked, chained down on a bed of nails which rip the boil-infested flesh on his back. A handsome young man clad in stallion clothing who suffers a curse of vanity. He stares into a mirror, preening himself, and then the reflection will change, forcing him to change his real-world appearance to match. Boils and sores eventually burst over his flesh, his body becomes hunched and arthritic, and his skin ages and withers. He will insult any of the party. A courtesan who has been cursed by Drachenfels. She has been desiccated into a skeleton, but is still alive and believes herself to be unerringly beautiful. She is still dressed in highly revealing and fashionable clothing and will attempt to desperately seduce the party. A cleric of Sigmar is forced to stare into the wall, which contains the face of a daemonette. The daemonette flicks her tongue out to stab and rip out at the cleric's body. Purple wounds ooze blood and trickle down his body. He can do nothing but moan with pain. If the adventurers free the cleric, they will find that he is actually a doppelganger and attack them, running off and assuming the form of a character it manages to hit. The final cell is actually a warp passage, another opportunity for backtracking, escape, or fast travel. This room has a ward of forbiddance protecting it, requiring the party to go through a north-south hallway past the initial one we are covering. The center of this room is dominated by a huge pentagram, and it's covered in chaos symbology. If the party breaks the ritual circle for any reason, a Lord of Change will appear. This is a highly dangerous situation, and the Lord of Change will likely toy with the party before killing them, offering an opportunity for escape or perhaps some sort of scheme on the player's part. With that said, a party will most likely die attempting to fight such a creature, so it's in their best interest to flee or otherwise deceive the demon as soon as possible. At the far end of the room is a mirror, black as midnight and radiating magic. The mirror's only function is to show a young Constant Drachenfels, posed as a young man without his mask, his arm draped around a demon. It is purely for vanity. Just a tiny part of Drachenfels' massive hoard is kept here in the treasury. Guess what's on the door? That's right, it's ya boy, Ward of Forbiddance. There are 4 locked chests in this room, and each chest is covered by a metal cage. Halflings or gnomes can fit inside the cages by breaking a bar to reach the chests, but other characters need to break more to fit inside. There are 2 suits of animated adamantine armors here that will attack the party the moment they enter. Assuming they can get through the bars, the next problem for the party is that each of the chests are entirely trapped. The first has spring-loaded darts, injecting manbane poison for each successful hit. If the chest is forced open, an additional dart trap will fire. The second trap, then, has the same dart trap, but the poison is elfbane. Inside this chest is yellow mold encased in a glass sphere, which will release if the chest is forced open. The third chest is slightly decayed, but has a permanent magic lock upon it, requiring a Cleric of Renauld or someone capable of disabling magic locks to remove. Otherwise, successfully lockpicking only has a 50% chance of succeeding. The chest is magically supported to prevent destruction or being forced open. If the chest is opened, a number of magically sharpened knives will fly out, causing 2d6 wounds to party members who get hit. If anyone is hit, an initiative test must be made. If it fails, they will lose one of their arms, unless they're wielding a shield on the arm that they get hit on. If the initiative test is failed by 30% or more, the adventurer loses both arms. The fourth chest has a chaos demon bound into the lock. If the lock is ever broken open, the demon attacks the adventurers, and a gas trap is triggered. The gas debuffs and weakens the players by 10 to weapon skill, ballistic skill, and initiative, and a -1 to their strength and toughness and attacks. Even if they successfully resist the gas, they do get a minimum debuff of -5. The demon, of course, is unaffected. As you can see, each of these chests are insanely dangerous. So what's the treasure inside? The first chest has 10,403 brass pennies. The second has 3,822 silver shillings. The third haul has gold crowns, with multiple gold crowns in various sacks in the chest. The first has 847, an additional 1,022 in a sack containing the head of Don Luis the 16th ? Roman numerals? Although these 1,000 coins are made by counterfeit red gold and are much more sentimental than valuable. The third sack has 1,882 Kislevite gold rubles, which can be spent as normal in Kislev or exchanged at a 3-to-1 ratio in the Empire. The fourth sack has 400 ancient imperial crowns, each of which is worth 10 gold crowns to a proper collector, although these coins are covered in manbane poison. Failure to notice this means the wielder will be poisoned and potentially kill themselves if they pick up too many coins too quickly without noticing. However, with sufficient cleaning, this sack can provide a party with 4,000 gold, a pretty insane hoard. The fifth sack contains a cask of mahogany bound with silver and lined with red velvet. The cask itself is worth 250 gold crowns, with 24 gems contained within. 22 of these gems are sturdy, but not magnanimous, such as peridots, pearls, and spinels, and are worth 250 gold crowns each, and the final two are worth 1,200 gold crowns each, although the exact gem is not mentioned, so perhaps some form of diamond or opal. This room is shaped like a giant chest cavity, as if the group had entered a massive giant's body. Huge yellowed ribs grow from the floors along the curved walls. Which, speaking of, seem to go on forever. The entire room is a seemingly endless, massive dead body. Huge piles of bones are across the room, and a sternum-shaped ceiling slopes down into a throne, with a single figure sitting upon it. The figure is draped in more vestments and wields a magical wand. Of course, the party will be attacked if they attempt to vandalize the room or take the wand. This room is heavily enchanted, and all undead within the room are unaffected by magic, making it highly dangerous for a mage or cleric-heavy party. If the party manages to take the wand and survive the resulting onslaught, they will acquire a Wand of Dust, a potentially powerful wand, for later. Much like the previous rooms, this area of the dungeon is used for summoning and experimenting, and in this case, it is with the elementals. The door to this place is unnaturally strong, having 8 toughness and 20 wounds. Pentacles and magic circles traced with silver and mercury line the room. However, the pentacles and symbology has been already used, and the room is entirely inert and worthless to a party when it comes to valuables, but it might service as a functional place of rest. It's another warp passage. Another fucking warp passage! This one covering the north-south passage from the east-west sea-like passage. This one requires a willpower test, and a failure will teleport the relevant character into the cells, at the mercy of the skeleton torturer. Their wrists will be in manacles, however. No struggling means you make no noise, and Bremer only has a 5% chance of noticing the character upon teleportation, at least within the first hour, and the party should definitely hope his friends don't abandon him if he gets caught by Bremer. This hallway is normal, beyond being infected by a strange spirit. It has a 20% likeliness to appear each round a character is within the hall. The figure will appear as a ghastly thin, stooped human male in late middle age. He mutters and cackles to himself. Elemental sparks flicker off his form, small stones ripple at his feet, and a gentle breeze wraps around his head. This is the ghost of a master elementalist, his spirit forever channeling the energies of his power. He is wholly insane and cannot be made docile through diplomacy. The ghost will burst into flames, surrounded by a halo of fire, and attacks with fervor until it or the intruders are destroyed. Going to the east side of the Fire Ghost's hallway will lead you into the gallery, an observation area for Room 89, the Black Pit. There is a handrail here for observers, and is supported by various gargoyle-faced rods that appear scary but are actually completely harmless. When the adventurers peer into the pit, however, all they see is a deep mist. One must tap a specific groove upon the handrail twice in order to disperse the mist and begin the show. This place is an enchanted show, magically pressed down into the ground, various figures permanently performing scenes pleasing to Castle Drachenfels. The book does give a scene here, specifically regarding rotting flesh in the presence of undeath, where all the figures are basically zombies, but as a GM, feel free to add any other type of scene that would fit here. As for the default scene, the leprous pavane is being enacted. Their stinking, rotting flesh sloughs to the ground. A skeletal butler is serving dinner to a seated group of pighead mutants, slavering over their meal as the butler rolls the intestines of a living, writhing man around a hooked serving fork and serves them, still steaming, to the dinner guests. D3 insanity points per round will be gained here by watching the scene. If you are running a scene where Drachenfels himself is the main enemy, each of the dancers will instead be exact duplicates of the adventurers, greeted by an actor in an iron mask. He will laugh and taunt the figures and show them their greatest fears, whatever that might be. If the party ever foolishly jumps onto the Black Pit, it will be over. Any who touch the floor will be forced to join the party forever, although a willpower test is allowed to determine this if the party attempts to go down the stairs to reach the pit. You are going to need the key from the attic in order to actually access this room. The door is blocked off by all other methods of entry, including spells or working around the door. Ethereal spells will not work, and other such methods. Characters who enter this room must test for fear. The temperature drops to a bitter chill, a freezing fog clogs their eyes, and the soul pupae begins to float towards the characters. These are strange human heads with wriggling maggot bodies glowing with ectoplasm. Their vestigial, useless hands grope around them as their closed eye faces press forwards, shooting ectoplasm in all directions. The pupae wriggle through the air and can be pushed away with ease, but if the characters directly attack the pupae, be it out of fear or anything else, something else will happen. The pupae will transform, their pupils dilate in terror, and it screams at its own death. The skull of the pupae become translucent, and cords of white form within the skull like a spiral. The cords trail away into the distance, where Drachenfels awaits, dragging the soul pupae into oblivion. All that's left is horror, slime, and D4 insanity points. This process will begin if the players don't do anything for 2 rounds. Escape is required here, for the entire party risk losing their characters to insanity if they don't do anything about it. There is a false lock here to the next door, but in reality, no key will actually work. It's made simply to get the players to waste time. They must physically destroy the door here, with a toughness of 5 and durability of 17. And here it comes. The Blood Heart. The door will lead the group to the very ephemeral insides of the castle, which mimic a literal body. The material of the walls are membrane-filled cartilage. Slender blood vessels can be seen inside the walls. Cilia and polyps line along the pipe-like hallway. The group must be careful, however. A particularly mean warp passage is in a few of these halls. If they were to go to the wrong tunnels, they can potentially be teleported to various locations, such as outside the castle, back at the start of the warp passage, a random different warp passage, or at the entrance of the heart. Frankly, I would remove the outside the castle option, although GMs who want to keep the spirit of the castle 100% would keep it. Once the players reach the actual heart, however, well, this will be a fight for the ages. But we shall save the best for last.
You didn't save that Skagadorf Burgermeister's daughter, did you? She pleaded for mercy as you drove home the stake.
At first, I was simply going to go over the new monsters section in the book. After all, the 200-some-odd creatures, going over each one painstakingly, that'd be insane, right? Right? You are correct. That would be insane. And it is by convention that I cover them all. I will leave no stone unturned. This is not for you, the viewer. It's for me. It's for my sanity. If I don't overturn every single rock, then I shall never forgive myself upon publishing this video. Sigmar, help me. Alright, let's do this. A few things to note. Undead within the castle don't have instability. Most inanimate objects reanimated are immune to psychologies. Most things have alignments of chaotic or evil. If I forget to mention an undead creature's special lack of instability rules, or an animated armor's immunity to psychology, such things have been mentioned here. When there is any mention of zombies, they shall be using this profile. Furthermore, zombies are not subject to instability nor stupidity in Castle Drachenfels and have a 50% chance for infected wounds. Like all undead, they cause fear. Harpies are classed as the swooper flying type. They can attack omnidirectionally while airborne, but are subject to fear from fire and spells that flash light. They have sonar, and mechanically this translates into having night vision. Much like the zombies, skeletons are not subject to lesser undead rules when within the bounds of Castle Drachenfels, such as instability. Their chance of causing infections on wounds is 35%. The Collective Ghost is a neutral-aligned entity immune to non-magical weapons. They may go invisible or visible at will. The Collective Ghost can cause both fear and physical damage with its touch, and can drain victim strength for D3 days. A character who is reduced to 0 strength in this manner is, of course, slain. The mutants in the tower are not undead, but they do indeed appear so. Their alignment is chaotic, and their appearance is said to change round by round. Their limbs extend or shrink, the ends of their arms change from claws to suckers to clubs and back, and their bodies undulate and shift from oozing gelatinous forms to baggy sacks of yellowed fat. They receive only half damage from any fire-based attacks because of their slimy coatings and are immune to psychology. The champion of Tzeentch, I thought it was Khorne, imprisoned within Tower 7, was magically prevented from escaping until released. The adventurers opening the door to this tower means that the champion will indeed leave, after he's killed all the adventurers, of course. His appearance is stated to be incredibly bizarre, with black singed skin and tentacles for legs, which allows him to climb freely and not lose much of his movement rate. His face is constantly mutating, from human to blank to pink to the face of various creatures and entities ranging from the gross, the mundane, the pretty, and everything in between. Anyone fighting him receives a -10 to all combat rolls because of this. He has the following chaos attributes: magic resistance, black skin, horns, mace tail, tentacles, and sucker-tipped tentacles. He has a torn-sleeved mail coat, a breastplate, a magical sword with the protection from elves' enchantment, and of course, magic destroyer. The skeletal horses within the stables are just horses plus skeletons. Standard undead profile applies. The Headless Horseman is, much like the meme of the Headless Horseman, a headless undead creature. He has a ghostly whip in one hand and uses his hand for ghost touches with his other hand. What the fuck was that sentence? Anyway, his touch causes fear. His whip always auto-hits the victim's head, and the victim must make a toughness test upon receiving damage. If this is failed, the victim receives an awful burning welt, which stings and blinds him. For D4 rounds, the character can only parry attacks and not make any himself. He receives a -10 to his characteristics of weapon skill and fellowship until a cure severe wound or other such healing method is provided to cure the welt. Beyond this, he runs with the same special properties as the Collective Ghost. The Grand Carriage's ram is a functional stomp attack. In addition, each of the carriage's doors has a preserved Skaven head that will bite anything in range. When detached, they will fly as super types. It counts as a flammable target, immune to psychology, and gives the Skaven heads +20 to weapon skill as long as they are still attached. Speaking of, the Skaven heads, again on the carriage, can detach to fly around and attack backliners. They have a bite attack and are flammable targets. The gargoyles within the gargoyle corridor are mainly partly so, primarily the heads and torsos of the gargoyles that spawn from the walls. The corridor generates an infinite number of these part gargoyles, so they aren't particularly strong, and being stone reanimated, they are of course immune to psychologies. Their attacks are made to distract the party from the gargoyles that are about to drop from above. The gargoyles are small enchanted stone figures. The gargoyles can attack adventurers by jumping down upon them and are classed as landers. Ghosts run under basic Drachenfels stability rules, alongside with the touch debuff that all other Drachenfels ghosts have, making a -10 to all leadership checks upon touch. This is just the Chameleon Leech from Core, Fierce Fire, Immune to Psychology, Alignment Neutral. Once again, this is just an amoeba from Core. It can engulf victims to deal continuous damage to them, and engulfed characters are only released when the amoeba is destroyed. Red mold is in Core, but mold is kind of a weird enemy, so I will mention it in more detail here. It has a spore cloud that explodes in a 5-yard radius for 3 rounds. Anyone within the spore cloud must make an initiative test or be blinded for 2d6 hours, which does provide a -25 to the victim's weapon skill, initiative, and dexterity, and missile fire is impossible, alongside a +25 for any attacker. Humans and halflings acquire d6 insanity points from contact with red mold. This is animated armor, obviously. It has 1 AP to all locations alongside toughness as well, and each gauntlet has an enchanted sword that dispels one zone spell on contact. Same as they are in Core, they fear fire. On bite, the blood leech drains the victim's blood for 1 wound per round. They have a 40% chance of wound infection on damage. The Cornet Fleshhounds obviously follow Khorne, duh. They cause fear in anything under 10 feet tall, are immune to psychologies from anything except chaos entities stronger than them, such as greater demons. They're subject to instability. They have fear and hatred against followers of Slaanesh. These previous things are primarily attributed to Khorne in 1st edition and applies to anything Cornet in this book. And the Fleshhounds themselves are rather agile, with the ability to leap and jump over various obstacles. If the Fleshhound manages to get in a bite attack, it gets 2 instant free attacks with its claws, with no weapon skill test necessary. It has a Collar of Khorne, which increases its willpower to 89 for the purpose of resisting magic. Bloodletters are pretty dangerous. The Bloodletter has a poisonous bite and 1 claw attack, or a poisonous bite and 1 weapon attack. It can spit poison up to 10 yards away. It regenerates 1 wound per turn. It has natural body armor. Victims of Bloodletter poison must pass a toughness test or take 2d6 wounds. The sword of the Bloodletter, known as a Hellblade sword, is made of brass and gives +10 to the wielder's weapon skill, alongside their base damage raising to 4d6. However, their 6s no longer explode. The Hellblade will also drain 2d6 magic points from any creature or follower of Slaanesh when it hits. The Killer Bed causes fear. It has stone rollers for crushing attacks. Victims must make an initiative test or be knocked down on attack. The bed has a +20 to any characters it successfully hits, but only on the following round. Curtains count as flammable targets, but take no magic from blunt weapons, and stone rollers are treated as having 2 armor points. In combat, the bed can attack 2 different characters with its stone rollers. The curtains around the bed also have magical attacks. While they do have separate profiles, they notably have 2 toughness and 5 wounds each. Damage inflicted on these curtains does not damage the bed itself, but if the bed is destroyed, the curtains lose all power and become mundane. Destroying a curtain prevents the bed from deploying Wind Blast spells. Hit locations are rolled using a d10. A 1 through 7 hits the main body, 8 or 9 is a stone roller, and 10 is a curtain. Striking a stone roller brings a 25% chance to break and destroy any non-magical weapon. Gnome bats are semi-illusory creatures generated by the side curtains of the killer bed. They attack by flying at characters and using their claws. Their attacks cause damage as normal, but also inflict a minor curse if a willpower test is failed. These curses are more irksome rather than vicious and act as the petty magic spell Curse. A remove curse spell is needed to cure the victim. These ghosts are, unlike other ghost types, still capable of casting magic. They have the spells Gift of Tongues, Glowing Light, Sleep, Zone of Silence, Aura of Resistance, Steel Mind, and Wind Blast. The elf ghosts are of good alignment. These are just slightly toughness buff daemonettes. They have 1 tail and 2 claw attacks, alongside 1 AP to all locations. Thaddeus Schnelling's stats, despite looking like a 16-year-old Luke Skywalker, is actually pretty solid. Of lawful Solkanite alignment, he has a good array of combat skills that make him dangerous to any party that fails to convince him that they are of friendly disposition. In his possessions are plate mail armor, including a magical +1 breastplate with 2 AP to his body and 1 to his legs. He has a helmet, a magical bastard sword for a +10 to his weapon skill, lined with 2 minor death runes, which cause extra damage to Khorne and Tzeentch followers. If the blade is wielded by non-lawful characters, the enchantments become inert. Maximilian von Steinhoff is a classic noble vampire, come to Castle Drachenfels to gain power. He appears as a 30-year-old man. He is given 2 profiles, one for when he is still in the coffin, and another for when he is fully awakened if the group are witless enough to allow it to happen. He has a pretty incredible stat line, alongside 52 magic points and an array of spells, including up to level 4 battle magic and level 4 necromancy spells. His skills focus on classical noble fencing, and it's assumed he can cast spells because of his vampiric status, rather than his magical aptitude. His gear includes a coffin, personal clothes and jewelry worth 50 gold crowns, a pouch with 100 crowns, a magical ring, which reduces magical point cost for shape-changing and cataplexy spells to 1 point each. Beyond this, he follows all the special rules of a vampire. They may control lesser undead within 24 yards, they cast no reflection, and can cast spells naturally. They may also engage in a mist form to go ethereal. Vampires are bound by the mythological invitation rules, and thus must be invited inside by a victim to enter that victim's domicile. This has some implications for how Max is in here in the first place. Gillian Fassbender is an ex-mercenary turned vampiric minion. At the age of 27, she still retains her beauty and wit, and Shirley will use this to trick the party in order to allow her master's awakening in the alignment rooms. Her stats are pretty solid, her most dangerous attribute probably being an attack characteristic of 3. She has a magical silk gown that provides 1 AP and acts as a robe of toughness, which improves her toughness by 1. She has a magical sword, a +1 that adds an additional die to damage. She has an inscribed ritual scroll, a spell ring with 15 magic points that contains the spells of Wind Blast and Cause Panic. She also has a stashed backpack with camping and adventuring gear. The Cuckoo Clock is a nice ornate clock and is entirely completely safe. Or not. If the group want the keys to the attic to access the castle heart, library, and other zones, they must bypass the dangerous and kind of amusing opponent. It's a sentient psychopathic clock corrupted by so-called unspeakable evils. The clock makes attacks with its long-leaded weight chains, which can magically stretch 12 yards. The first hit causes damage, and if hit, the character must make an initiative test, afforded a bonus with dodge blow, or the pendulum wraps itself around the victim's neck. It begins to drag the victim towards the clock. Strangling chains inflict 1 wound per round, and a character being strangled suffers a -10 to all rolls. A chain can be severed if it has strained itself across 6 wounds, and once severed, it no longer constricts anyone. Any character striking at a pendulum, which is constricting another character, will accidentally hit said character on a roll of 96 or worse. The clock can generate clone images of itself. It can do this every round, to a max of 4 duplicates at once. The cuckoo within the clock is another evil bird. It will peck enemies who are dragged too close from the chain. It has a surprisingly powerful strength of 4, a weapon skill of 50, and 2 attacks. It is actually quite possible to get pecked to death by this thing. It can also fly as a swooper type. When the cuckoo clock strikes an hour, it may make a randomly rolled effect. This can range from slowing down time, forcing someone to age, turning someone into a cuckoo, stopping all of time, turning someone into a giant human-sized cuckoo, causing massive terror, and paralyzing all who witness it with a dread image of Drachenfels himself. The ghost of Stanislav can be an enemy or friend to the party. Appearing as a 70-year-old, 5'6" tall ghostly figure, he wears a nondescript set of robes and a trailing cloak. He has general responsibility over multiple areas of the castle, and can thus be found in many of the general rooms or rooms dedicated to learning and study. He also fervently doesn't believe the fact that he is dead, and could even react violently if this subject is pushed. He believes Drachenfels is still alive and that the current year is 2464. He has a neutral alignment, although the book does state he can be pushed to an evil alignment. His skills befit that of a sage, and he has all the standard ghost isms of Castle Drachenfels. The skeletal dinosaur is very dangerous with its high strength and 4 attacks. It can only direct 3 of its attacks towards a single target at once due to its size difference. Its hits have a 35% chance of causing infected wounds. These demonettes in the Chaos terrains are much like the previous ones in the castle, except they have elastic limbs and multiple arms, so they can range melee attacks up to 4 times. The ethereal champion of Tzeentch, contained inside the pocket realm of Tzeentch on the first floor, is unarmored and clad only in a wispy robe of smoky, half-ethereal material. His form is covered in bizarrely covered skin and a strange head mutation. He has 3 attacks per round, 2 with his sword and 1 with his mutated arm. Hilariously, his stats have been eroded twice, taking his toughness from 5 to 6 to 8. Of course, his alignment is Tzeentch. He has very solid combat stats and skills. As for his chaos powers, he has the arm of a flamer of Tzeentch, whose fire attacks are at strength 1, but project d6 minus 2 attacks per round automatically. The other reward is Change of Tzeentch, which gives him an additional eye, brightly patterned skin, dimensional instability, and scaly skin. This champion has a Ring of Toughness, a magical gauntlet, and a magical beweaponed extremity. Either I switched the 2 champions, or this one should have Magic Destroyer, and I feel I've been Mandela affected. The shriveled, slimy figure of the Oracle is an ex-scholar, ex-wizard with strange mental powers. He is stated to exist in a limbo state between life and undeath. The slime that surrounds him is used for both offense and defense. Functionally, he's like Gara, but with cum. The 8-yard diameter of the muck is treated as very difficult ground. Any character wading through it must make an initiative test each round or suffer a minus penalty to initiative and weapon skill. These effects are cumulative. If initiative is ever reduced to 0, the character is trapped in the slime. The Oracle can fire 2 thick strands of slime each round, which goes off of his ballistic skill. Strands don't do damage, but do damage initiative as long as they're inside it. The Oracle has the spell Strength of Combat precast, which gives him d6 plus 1 wounds. His spells include Curse, Sleep, Fireball, Flight, Steal Mind, Strength of Combat, Aura of Protection, Mystic Mist, and Zone of Steadfastness. He has a multiple warding ring, which protects him against Fireball, Lightning Bolt, and Blast. Each slime attack has a 5% chance of causing infection. The Biting Banister is a literal biting banister. It's a banister that can bite adventurers. It's flammable. The puppets are magical mannequins, and for what they are, they're decently intelligent. They're witty, but not necessarily cunning, and they attack with fists. Normal puppets have the skill Mime and Mimic and count as flammable targets. The Master of Ceremonies puppet is far more fierce in intelligence compared to his contemporaries. He is alignment evil. He has a baton that can cast an aura of protection, and if he manages to strike a figure with the baton, he can turn them temporarily into a puppet. The baton can also launch fireball spells, able to fire 3 for no magic point cost. Finally, if the master puppet succeeds a hit, he may make a willpower test. If he's successful, he regains half the wounds he inflicted on others rounded down. He cannot exceed his wound score, however. Of course he is flammable, but unlike other puppets, he is immune to non-magical weapons. The killer door attacks by firing brass doorknobs at its victims, at a target up to 16 yards away. The effective strength of these doorknobs is 3. The door magically regenerates its doorknobs and can fire twice per turn. As it's a door, it's flammable. Gerd Buchwald, the Magister Impedimentae, is stated to be dim-witted but intensely loyal. He was given the title of Junior Magister Impedimentae from Drachenfels, a reference to the Magister Impedimentae in Enemy Within, which Gerd can say correctly 90% of the time. Of course, the Render parasite resides within him, so Gerd himself dies fairly quickly and is rather inconsequential. Basically an enlarged version of the alien larval form, the Render is a solid horror moment for the party. It has an insanely fast movement and initiative score alongside 2 attacks. It has a bite which can cause infections in 35% of hits. Unlike other fungal enemies, the fungal mass can actively attack. Victims must make a toughness test or suffer -10 or -1 to all characteristics based on characteristic type. These spores can quickly drain someone to 0 and kill them, considering their insane 8 attacks. Friedrich Bremer, the skeleton major hero and torturer, wears a black robe and scraps of leather from his old days as a torturer. His skills primarily lie in torturing, keeping victims alive, and some decent combat capabilities. He has a heavy branding iron, a pair of manacles, a keyring to the cells, and perhaps a specialist weapon. The doppelganger can reproduce the likeness of a humanoid creature between 4 and 8 feet, including equipment. People have only a 10% chance of noticing something odd about the doppelganger. Reproduced armor is 1 AP less effective, however. Adamantine plate armor is an upgraded form of animated armor. The adamantine version has 2 AP to all locations in addition to toughness scores. It is armed with a sword and shield. The Lock Demon is bound in the 4th chest of Drachenfels' treasury. It has dangerous claws made of chitin, which drip venom and can rip through metals. On receiving damage, victims must do a toughness test or suffer D6 additional wounds. Claws ignore and potentially even damage armor. It is immune to gas attacks alongside psychologies not caused by more powerful chaos entities. The Undead Cleric has no spellcasting powers, although it is a solid opponent in melee thanks to its decent weapon skill and 3 attacks. Inside the giant dead body room alongside the Undead Cleric, you can see the skeletal limbs. These limbs reach out to grab and strike out at adventurers. They aren't super notable otherwise beyond being undead. The Fire Ghost projects a halo of intense fire that is centered around itself. Entering the halo causes D3 + 1 Strength 5 hits on anyone within range. D6 + 1 if the target is flammable. Each round, up to 3 flares can be fired out from the halo, using ballistic skill to determine hit chance. A flare can only shoot at one character at one time. Flares cause D2 Strength 4 hits. The Fire Ghost's alignment is insane. It randomly flits between alignments. Of course, it's made of fire, and thus immune to fire.
Is your faith wavering, little Victor? Your veins are so cold where once raged a flame.
Much to my enjoyment, every single warp passage does have a potential of spawning 2 unique encounters, so let's get into them. Snitlet the Snotling is weak, especially for a Snotling. He is extremely cowardly, but isn't particularly evil. He knows how to speak Old Worlder, he has a bent fork, and a pair of filthy leather pouches. He wears a pot on his head. If threatened, he will begin to cry. He has night vision and is immune to mold enemies. He has a fear of anything. He's a solid companion for the group. Far worse than Snitlet, the Snuffling Horror is a huge amorphous worm. It lives naturally in the warp and just happened to wander into the passageways, these things being of chaos, in search of prey. It tries to feed by simply crushing its prey with its prodigious girth. It uses a stomp attack and excretes a highly dangerous acid that is treated as a strength 8 hit on contact. Seeing the creature is D2 insanity points if one fails a willpower test, and of course a cool test against the effects of fear and terror. The Fiend is described as a spirit of pure evil, drawn from the warp using the power of constant Drachenfels. It appears as a classical diabolic figure from biblical art and myth, with a human upper torso and a goat-like head with large curved horns, alongside cloven hooves. In lore, it is able to choose almost any human-sized form, but will adopt the fear of this demonic presence to cause most fear in potential onlookers. Through this, my interpretation of the Fiend is that this is Drachenfel's own version of a demon. So able is he to manifest the fear and terror he strikes throughout the world and its legendarium that he's able to manifest somewhat lesser demons such as the Fiend. In terms of comparative strength, it can certainly outclass a Bloodletter, but not a Bloodthirster. It is a demon that can shapeshift and can also serve as a red herring ally to potential adventurers. It has great movement, solid weapons and range skills, and most importantly, 3 attacks. At 18 wounds and 5 strength, this thing, if it hits, can hit hard and very quickly. Predictably, the fiend is of evil alignment. The Guardian Spirit is an ethereal undead, existing to fulfill some sort of territorial possession over an object, room, or a set of objects. This can range from a mother protecting her child's room, an avaricious merchant protecting a treasure chest, or a soldier's spirit still possessing the battlefield. As long as they remain within their bounded area, they are not unstable, and thus are much harder to deal with and properly banish with magic. They have a natural +20 to rolls to resist necromancy spells, and are immune to psychology and any effects that might cause them to flee their bounds. Being a spirit, it, of course, causes fear. In the castle proper, its guardian spirit treats the entire castle as its bounded area, and thus has the above benefits. These spirits have 3 toughness, 17 wounds, 40 initiative, 40 leadership, 18 intelligence, 18 cool, and 48 willpower. All other stats are 0 and operate under an interesting spirit combat system. Spirit combat is when an ethereal ghost-like entity attempts to attack a non-ethereal entity. This may only be attempted against characters with an intelligence of 6 or more, and creatures that are immune to psychology, through frenzy or other effects, are immune to the powers of spirit combat. When attacked, the victim of the combat rolls a willpower test, and if it's successful, the attack fails. If failed, however, the character loses d10 willpower. If reduced to 0 willpower in this manner, the spirit possesses and controls the target character. Lost willpower is reclaimed at 10 points per turn, and once per turn the character may attempt a willpower test to throw off the spirit's control. Described as a small, human-like and magical creature, this tiny thing, this homunculus, is the creation of various wizards and alchemists. They are faithful and devoted servants to whomever created or otherwise tamed them. They have no intelligence, nor a mind of their own. They take on the personalities of their creator or embody a specific part of that personality. Either way, they are tiny humanoids with wings and talons. They trend towards a neutral alignment unless otherwise directed by their master. They are immune to psychology and cannot be made to flee. They can fly, but this flight is rather clumsy, so they are treated as lander types. They attack with 2 claws and 1 bite, with modest stats all around, apart from a very high cool and willpower. Similar to ghosts or marshlights, this is a creature, the poltergeist, that is a floating, disembodied life force. Much like the traditions and mythologies surrounding a poltergeist, this creature is bound to a particular area, usually the place of its death, but not always. Unlike guardian spirits, the poltergeist will try to use physical objects to harm players. Indeed, combining the two can be pretty dangerous. While the guardian spirit reduces magical defenses and gradually takes over party members' wills, the poltergeist will be entirely invisible and silent, and if they cannot be seen, they can't even be attacked. They are weak to necromancy spells, however, such as Destroy Undead or Annihilate Undead. Priests of More who use Divine Necromancy or your classic evil necromancers might be able to make short work of a lone poltergeist. A few zone spells, such as Sanctuary, Life, and Purity, might instantly kill a poltergeist, much as it would a ghost. A poltergeist can throw as many items as it has attacks, which makes it much more dangerous compared to shooter characters who usually can't fire more than once per turn. Encountering a poltergeist in a grassy knoll might be no problem to deal with, but a poltergeist within a well-stocked armory, kitchen, or battle graveyard would be a serious problem, especially combined with other undead or perhaps a controlling necromancer. With high movement and decent toughness, the poltergeist can be focused down if a party has the tools to deal with it, but otherwise, an adventurer's best bet is to run away. A vampiric minion is someone who is hypnotized over time or otherwise subject to a particularly skilled vampiric hypnotist. A true vampiric minion is quite difficult to actually create, as most vampires might rely on simpler short-term powers over the mind or use seduction, bribery, or other such emotional manipulation. A vampiric minion, then, is a mortal whose entire personality and sense of self has been directed towards serving the vampire in virtual eternity. They feel themselves in complete submission to their master or mistress and might even drink blood, but but only in an attempt to be even closer. They are complete slaves of their master or mistress and truly revel in it. A vampiric minion template may be applied to character templates by simply giving them a third of the vampire's stats, exceptions to cool and willpower, which debatably would be lower when subject to vampire powers. In this, the vampire has focused the minion's mind to such a keen edge that they perform at their peak in service to their master or mistress. Vampiric minions can range from more simple, brute-like characters motivated by honor, all the way to paramours whom serve a more concubine figure for their master. Since vampires are usually evil, minions are also of evil alignment. However, they will be whatever alignment their master is, in the rare instance of a non-evil vampire, for example. The final creature to the castle in the Bestiary will be the Wraithwisp, a rather strange undead formed from a human soul, which is basically a ghost, right? Anyway, the main difference is that a Wraithwisp is formed from the pieces of the human soul that have gone insane from the strange things in the Warhammer world. So a ghost that goes insane after its death is different from a Wraithwisp, which goes insane before his death. They are classed as uncaring, self-hating, always with an alignment modifier of insane or usually evil or chaotic. Unlike many other undead featured in the castle, the Wraithwisp is not bound to anything. It may travel freely, and much like its chaotic origins, it can go anywhere and cause chaos wherever it may go. Instead of doing physical damage, Wraithwisps drain the victim's strength on a successful hit, requiring the victim to roll a toughness test. Because of their freedom of movement, Wraithwisps make for fantastic backline destroyers. Clerics and priests beware. These drained strength regenerates at a rate of 1 point per 12 hours of complete rest. The recovery rate is perhaps the worst of the Wraithwisp. In towns or other such civilized safety nets, it's of little consequence. But in dangerous locales like Castle Drachenfels, a character that wants their strength back will have to rest completely at the mercy of their allies in the environment. Wraithwisps are harmed by magical weapons and are immune to non-magical weapons. Being ethereal, they can go anywhere not magically protected, and are not bound by walls or physics.
Too ready to believe in authority. You heed your faith too late. That's why Skagerdorf burned.
A cool quirk of Castle Drachenfels is its high replayability value. Going through different routes and rooms can radically change a play experience, and these alternate scenarios place more emphasis on this as well. While most people will probably want to engage with the Drachenfels Lives scenario, in which Drachenfels' castle drains the players of their energy for each room they visit in order to resurrect the man himself, a GM who doesn't want to throw Drac at the party or a GM who has already played through it can use the castle instead as a highly hazardous environment containing rival factions or other such things. It's assumed that Drachenfels is either dead or otherwise unable to come back in these scenarios. Although if you really want to pull an Xbox 360 hidden achievement run, I guess you could run all of them at once. God help you, though. Instead, perhaps a GM can run these sequentially as a sort of darkest dungeon roguelike situation, going in to achieve an objective, then getting out safely. Gregor Kappelmuller and his Cornet cultists. Herr Kappelmuller was once a happy part of the Telebecklund penal colony as its resident torturer. The obsession with pain and blood has made him into a rather fervent cultist. He gathered up his number 2, a Klaus Brandauer, alongside some other Korn boys to go to Castle Drachenfels, based on a number of accounts and documents detailing the window to Korn's realm in Drachenfels' throne room. Gregor is under the hilarious delusion that Drachenfels is a worshipper of Korn, and thus he and his boys are due for a reward from both Drac and Korn should they resurrect him. Despite not being necromancers, I have no idea how a ritual like this would work, but hey, who knows? In a roguelike castle run, this ritual could have, without the party's knowledge, actually succeeded, kicking off Drachenfels Lives in a later run. Gregor himself, being a cultist of Korn, is highly dangerous. With a toughness of 8, 3 attacks, and strength 5, his damage output is, well, pretty dangerous, but his hit chance is relatively low. His skills mainly include combat, some animal interaction with his Cornet hounds, and some leadership skills. He has a sleeved mail coat, a shield, a magical sword with the freeze attack enchantment, the instability enchantment, and the resist fire enchantment. He has a few chaos attributes as well: magic resistant, illusion of normality, blood frenzy, and bestial face. If Gregor were to ever wound an enemy, his blood frenzy and bestial face would break his illusion, and his true form, as a goat-like turn-skinned beastman, is revealed. Klaus was around when Gregor killed the old leader of the bandits that ambushed Gregor's caravan, and the bandits, alongside Klaus, accepted him as their leader. Klaus was nurturing his resentment across the months, and it's now reached a boiling point. His skills rely more on stealth and cunning than raw combat. Where Gregor's evil is that of a fiery chaos, Klaus's is of cold calculation. He's no slouch, but he does do less damage and less attacks. He has a leather jack, a metal breastplate, a mail coif and helmet, a magical +2 plate leggings, a crossbow with an enchanted arrow of division, and a sword. Obviously, Klaus can serve as a betrayal archetype, whose actions ruin Gregor's plans if the party play him right, but of course Klaus himself will probably betray the party after. The band of 6 outlaws aren't straight cultists. They are more random vagabonds with some vague grasp at the power they're trying to get. They are solid enough in their own right, and make for tougher enemies with their 2 attacks. So they aren't straight jobbers, they are only pseudo-jobbers. For an early game party, these guys will be very hard to deal with, and reducing their attack statistic to 1 might be needed. They have leather jacks, shields, mail coifs, swords, and crossbows. Erwin Crowitz is a more straight-up bandit, although certainly not a bloodthirsty one. With an alignment of neutral, he goes more for avarice than kills. He doesn't inflict needless bloodshed, he refuses to harm women or children, and he knows where to go to dispose of stolen merchandise. He also knows this really cool move called the Tiger Drop, and he amplifies the symbology of the noble criminal quite well, and actually his name is Kiryu, and okay, real talk, the book literally describes him to be an Errol Flynn type character. This book was written before I was born. Apparently, Errol Flynn is an Australian actor who was known for his swashbuckling rogue style of characters he played. Everyone older than the age of, 45 is ranting at my lack of knowledge right now, but sorry, old man, the future is now. Krauts himself is in his late 20s and a 6-foot-tall manlet. His eyes are dark and intense, and he has Talayan heritage somewhere in him considering his olive complexion. The magical bandana around his forehead only sets off his attractive features. He looks clean and dashing, despite the sorry state of Castle Drachenfels. He has a magical sleeved coat, an enchanted headband that gives him 2 AP, a shield, an enchanted sword with the powers of flight and spell absorption, potions of healing and fortitude, and a spell ring with the spell Cure Light Injury. It has 9 magic points. The assorted party of outlaws all speak Riechspiel, although some hail from Bretonia. They are all incredibly loyal to Krauts, and won't surrender as long as he lives. 4 of his bandits have an A of 1, and the others have an A of 2. They all have solid combat skills, mirroring early game party members, with some other applications towards stealth and thievery. They have leather jacks, shields, helmets, swords, and crossbows. The Krauts gang can be either an enemy or an ally, I feel, to a neutral or good-aligned party, as long as the party is willing to share the loot, of course. They shall be in areas where the loot is highest, and unlike the Cornets, their goal could be much the same as the party: get as much as they can, and get out. Perhaps Krauts can be an ally against future runs, or a complication in the heat of the moment regarding some of the more dangerous rooms. Finally, we have Gobrat Pussfoot, an orc war boss who loves to wah with his boys. Frankly, he's just a big, lovable giant who just wants to have a good time, and who can blame him? He is, however, a bit of a nerd orc. His unique style of leading troops means his warband is much, much smaller than other warbands. His goal is to find a strong enough magical weapon in Castle Drachenfels so he might prove to his tribes, the Running Swords, that he's the boss. His alignment is evil, but could be pushed to neutral. He's a fighter through and through, and his weapon stats are nothing to scoff at. He has chainmail, a helmet, a magical sword that gives bonuses when fighting elves and humans, a crossbow, and some rations. He also has night vision and animosity towards goblinoids. There are 12 orcs under Gobrat's posse, and 3 are described as half-orcs, a retconned orc type, but are supposedly a mix of human and orc blood, created by some strange magics in the east. Presumably this means the Chaos Dwarves did some experimenting with their human and orc slaves. Not that humans and orcs can mate, of course. Gobrat's boys are treated as evil and speak a smattering of Reichspiel. The orcs are a bit tougher than the half-orcs. They have leather jacks, mail coifs, hand weapons, crossbows, rations, and a sealed vial of distilled pine marten urine, which is used as a perfume? Also, The perfume wearer, Urumf, is a girl orc. So I guess they can mate, actually. Old Hammer is weird.
Friends betray you, then they burn. Ramblers of Fear who'll be next. But of course, it won't be your fault, will it? It'll be the flame.
While Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition has a number of spells both reminiscent of 80s D&D as well as color magic spells that become more familiar in later editions, the books also come with a number of unique magical items, spells, and other such things. I shall dedicate this section to unique magic found within the castle not already mentioned. A Ward of Forbiddance is a level 2 battle magic spell spammed in the castle, so a mage or priest of career level 2 with the sufficient battle magic skill bought, based on mage or priest type, may use this spell. The Ward of Forbiddance is traced via a magical diagram in the air, using a rod which doubles as its own ingredient. The rod is a 6-inch bronze rod of half-inch diameter. Creatures who fail a willpower test cannot bypass the ward, but may attempt to bypass it once more after one day, although subsequent attempts do make it more difficult to bypass. The bypass? Hell is a bypass? This version costs 6 magic points. The spell can be upcasted for 12 magic points so that the user may cast a secondary cantrip-like spell onto the ward, hitting the first person attempting to pass the ward with whatever spell a wizard has placed upon it. A 3rd level battle mage, when creating this type of ward, may instead do a full-on spell specifically from this list: Cause Panic, Dispirit, Steal Magical Power, and Steal Mind. A 4th level mage might put upon a ward Cause Cowardly Flight, Corrode, Dispel Aura, Drain Magic, and Stand Still. In short, the Ward of Forbiddance is a powerful tool for protecting a location, but it's not an instant win button, as most of the spells you can put upon it are control spells. A wizard can bypass his own ward and hold hands with another person to have them bypass it as well. The Potion of Fortitude is a decently powerful potion, adding plus 10 to the user's cool and willpower during the potion's effect time, but the problem is that the ingredients is the midsection piece of a lizardman or zoatbrain, dried and mixed with a thick herbal unguent of any type. This paste must then be simmered with a pint of distilled water and a thimbleful of demon cerebral fluid for a period of 12 hours while more sleep is waning in full in the sky. In short, the ingredients are hard as hell to get. The Potion of Toughness increases the drinker's toughness by 2, or for the purpose of percentile rolling, by 20. Required ingredients are the fingernails of 2 dwarfs or 1 ogre, ground to a fine dust. You must then add a ground-down thorax chitin powder of a giant spider, treated to eliminate any venom. The dust must then be infused into 2 pints of ogre blood, which is simmered for 7 hours while protected by an Aura of Protection spell. A very strong potion that lasts for 10 times d6 minutes. Considering a turn is a minute, this can last for a combat or 2. Of course, the dangers of trying to acquire the ingredients and the morals associated if you are of a neutral or better alignment is something to keep in mind. The Wand of Dust is a very rare wand item, and it's pretty strange, all things considered. Created by a group of necromancers of good alignment, which is already strange on its face, that were active in Araby nearly 500 years ago. It is usable only by clerics of Mor or devout followers of Mor. The wand contains 40 magic points as a maximum, and is capable of casting each spell once per day. Destroy Undead 1, 4 magic points. Zone of Life level 2, 4 magic points per hour of cast. Annihilate Undead level 3, 16 magic points. Dispel Magic, level 4, 9 magic points, but affects only undead. The wand regenerates magic points at a rate of 2 per hour, but will not regenerate if used during nighttime. This item can dispel or destroy most undead creatures, as well as protect an area from undead. A cleric or follower of Mor will find amazing use of this item in Drachenfels' castle, able to protect the party during longer rest periods. The Lauren Ring is one of only a few created by the various craftsmiths of Athel Loren. It is sought out by the pre-generated character Emeriel, but the ring can also just be in the castle or used in other types of adventures. It increases the user's intelligence by 10, ballistic skill by 10, extends their night vision if they have it by 50 yards, and gives them the Concealment Woodland specialization, which doubles the bonus of concealing one in woodlands if the user already has Concealment Rural. The Lorn Ring is fantastic for elves as it doubles their species bonuses, but it also serves as a fantastic buffing item for non-elves who rely on stealth, shooting, or perception. We have touched upon black shards a little bit before. Black shards are loci of negative emotional energy, the collective depression, despair, exhaustion, and suffering formed from the limitless victims of Drachenfels' castle. Black shards radiate a bitter cold in a 3-yard radius. To approach a black shard, one must make a toughness test or lose strength on failure. They also lose 1 wound per round automatically. If a black shard is destroyed by normal means through force or magic, it explodes, causing D3 Strength 6 hits to all characters within a 12-yard radius. All within the blast radius suffer a -5 to their leadership, intelligence, and willpower. Willpower lost through this method is permanent, although the other abilities may be restored within D10 plus 10 days through a successful willpower test. The blast itself projects negative thoughts, memories, and emotions, and those within must also make a cool test or suffer from the mental condition depression on failure. There is only one way to properly remove a black shard and its effects, through the Ritual of Lightning, which I also mentioned earlier. The ritual can be found in Lermontov's Grimoire. Lermontov's Grimoire contains a few spells that are from core that might be core to a party, such as an Aura of Resistance and Aura of Protection. It also has an improved version of the Glowing Light Petty spell. For its unique spells, however, this is where things get interesting. The first is Cure Insanity. In 1st edition, Insanity is your corruption points, so a spell to actively cure Insanity is amazing. However, it does require a human skull and 2 white frocks as ingredients, requiring grave digging or murder to access properly. That said, its main use is that it is accessible to most magic users, although it is slightly flawed compared to the Shalian Miracle version, which has the patient recovering from one disorder acquired by crossing insanity thresholds. When used on a patient after that patient's first receiving of it, that person must make a cool test at a -10 difficulty per time receiving it. Also, if they fail the test, they may never receive the spell again. If the cool test is missed by 30 or more points, they are afflicted with sudden dementia, so there is always the risk of insanity and that it will get worse. Assuming the character has a decent cool skill, this spell is a must-have for evil-aligned characters delving deep into chaotic places. The Ritual of Lightning is a special spell created by the titular Lermontov. It can be used to cure catatonia, depression, and functions as a cure insanity spell. It will not help anyone otherwise regarding insanities, however. The ritual, more importantly, destroys black shards safely and other such items of evil dependent on GM preference. When a black shard is destroyed via the ritual, a character will recover from all ill effects from both the black shard and Castle Drachenfels. The ritual itself does not consume magic points or require any additional spells to be cast. Its lack of ingredient cost makes it incredibly useful. The warp torch looks like a used-up torch, but it is not used up by fire if lit. A character using the warp torch may navigate warp passages with more safety, being able to see the end of the hallway and see where it might lead, if the players, of course, were foolish enough to snub one of the few potential friendlies to lead them through the halls, like Bartle.
Kill them now, Sierra. They'll betray you. Everyone always has. How many times a night do you long to burn them all, just because you can? You've done it before.
Finally, we shall touch upon the man himself. The titular owner of Castle Drachenfels, and a character overshadowed by other, more prominent villains in modern Warhammer fantasy. And so we boldly go. Drachenfels is a being of incredible potency. His base stats are nothing short of impressive and insane. He has perfect willpower, 4 attacks, and pretty much every stat being around 80, with the exception of his fellowship. His armor is a magical +3 plate armor. He has a gauntlet that allows him to roll damage rolls twice, and with a strength of 7, +1 via his gauntlet, he can basically one-hit a player and attack 4 times per turn, just with unarmed. He has a massive array of both combat and non-combat skills, can speak almost every language, and casts from a spell school of battle magic, necromancy, and demonology, of course at all levels. With 200 magic points, he can cast anything from cantrips to summon greater demon. He causes fear, terror if he removes his mask, and has a number of mutations and insanities. Notably, he suffers from megalomania, where he has animosity towards people who challenge his authority. If a character uses the phrase Sigmar, however, he does have to take a -20 willpower test in order to perform anything that round, the reasoning of which we will get into. Lucky for the players, this is his final form. The crux of Drachenfels' power is the players themselves. In the Drachenfels Live scenario, for every room they enter, Drachenfels' stats slowly but surely increase up to the maximum of what I detailed earlier and will probably show here. Risen from a corpse or otherwise reformed in the castle heart while the players adventure throughout the various rooms of the castle. So, why is this? Who is Constant Drachenfels, and why is he even dead? Drachenfels, the Great Enchanter, a devil in human form, who cheated death for centuries unknown, a man with appetites so base they lay beyond satiation, a necromancer, torturer of the dead, dismemberer of spirits, a vileness made flesh, a wizard, a scholar, a monster. Untold are the reaches of his barbarities, uncounted the number of his treacheries, beyond belief the depravities of his practices. Was ever such a vileness born of mortal flesh? A proto-human that existed amidst primal societies before the coming of the Old Ones, the man known as Drachenfels has perhaps once been a good man despite his current, civilized trappings. He lived, he fought, and he eventually died. However, unlike all others, he did not pass from the world to the next. Instead, thanks to a rare mutation, he awoke in another's body. And from this, Constant Drachenfels started his descent into evil. Whether this was from the process of reincarnating and subsuming another person's soul, an innate evil he possesses, or simply the callousness that comes from infinite lifetimes, Drachenfels, true to his name, is a constant and pervasive force upon the old world. Lucky for Drachenfels, he had found the powers of magic, or chaos, come easily to him once the polar gates broke upon the world. And so he began to experiment for untold millennia. In his younger years, he had tried to be more vicious and openly ruthless in his conquerings, like when he tried to dominate the tribes united by Sigmar Heldenhammer via a horde of greenskins he had oppressed upon with his magical aptitude. However, he was smote down by the not-yet-god. Eventually, Drachenfels had slithered away into the shadows, more content to foster his own private power base as the world lived and died beyond him. However, at this point, his reputation had preceded him, and every so often, rivals, allies, slaves, and perfidious witch hunters would arrive at his domicile and attempt to stop him. Once the sorceries of Nagash became known to the world, Drachenfels extended his magical knowledge not just from sorcery, color magic, and demonology, but added necromancy to his repertoire as well. This makes Drachenfels incredibly unique as a caster. His versatility is perhaps unmatched, save for the higher-tier elven casters of the world, such as Marathi or Teclis, or the Slann, such as Mazdamundi. And some could certainly say he might be able to easily rival these casters at the very least. Not to mention if they killed him, well, he would simply possess them after. As his vileness grew, as his power expanded, Drachenfels found himself more and more connected to his castle, and the dark heart that lay beneath. Much like how Drachenfels had superseded the soul stuff of any he came across, so too has his castle. The very rock and stone has been corrupted by his foul essence. In this, the castle works for him, much as a living entity, and the halls, already saturated in magics, will repair themselves from damage, repel attackers, dispel hostile magics, and other such action. Of course, the castle allows inhabitants to act within its halls mostly free. After all, it's no fun to simply win. A master magician of almost every school, near limitless immortality, debased appetites with a desire for domination, and a living castle that seems to be Drachenfels much as Drachenfels himself. Is this power truly the result of simple mutation? Or is it more? Is Drachenfels even a man? And I do not mean his gender. Was his awakening as a proto-human simply his first instance of sentience, where he was originally a simple, formless ether of thought that latched onto the first thing it touched? Maybe Drachenfels is much more than that. Perhaps he is the ancient dream stuff of chaos itself, seeking to corrupt and destroy, to dominate and survive, with little knowledge to its own purpose. Either way, all of these ambitions and questions came crashing down during a pivotal moment. Drachenfels' vessel, Lowell Lowenstein, had killed former would-be rivals, and in a dark blood ritual, used their bodies to fuel his return after an apparent death at the hands of Ostermarker Prince Otto von Königswald. Of course, the death was a suicide, as Drachenfels and Otto made a vile pact to lure Karl Franz and his family to the castle once his death had become publicly available. As the actors were killed, as Karl Franz and his family were held hostage, as Drachenfels returned to this world, all that stood between him and complete control of Karl Franz's body was a Lamian vampire and a playwright. As the Lamian was cast aside, Detlef Sarek had in his hands a wooden play hammer. He prayed to Sigmar as he made a futile attack against the darkling being, and much to everyone's astonishment, Sigmar answered. The hammer turned gold, and Drachenfels was smote down by the power of Sigmar. The Emperor was saved, the traitorous Ostermarker Count undone. The castle was left empty, with Drachenfels' few servants and demons still wandering its halls. Until, of course, a new party of adventurers enter, one of which is, of course, you the player. And so, the castle does its job. For every piece of greed that pushes the group forward, to find more loot or for every inattentive entrance, the castle will seep you and your allies' souls to reform the corpse of constant Drachenfels. Explore too much, and you will find yourself against an impossible foe. Explore too little, and you will have little to show for your Herculean efforts. This is one of the reasons I recommend running pre-gens and letting the players know ahead of time of the castle's danger, in vague terms, of course. A party can explore way too much and not even realize they are soft-locking themselves into doom. The power of Drachenfels is pervasive, vile, terrifying, and imposing. He may appear as any one, possessing any body for every new life he takes. The castle is evil because he is evil. Whether born or made, this does not matter. If Drachenfels was normal once, he is now so much more so, and woe betide any nosy heroes who might seek to end his reign of terror. For no matter what, Drachenfels will return. Bow your heads in supplication, ere fools, for when Nagash is dust, when Ulthuan is sunk, when Lustria is destroyed by plague and undeath, he shall remain forevermore. All hail the Great Enchanter, the champion of evil, the darkness that would not be defied. Drachenfels lives. The very tunnels echoed a heartbeat that thrummed with power and pulled fear straight from my veins. Heidi, Ursabet, and Jean-Paul are the only remaining companions I have left. Elmeriel, he trailed far behind our party. Ever since his survival in that ethereal, ghostly plane, he whispered to himself incessantly. Now he was whispering to the pupae of souls that we had managed to escape. None of us had it in our hearts to strike him down. Yet we trudged ever onward. My blood bond with Emmanuel was getting stronger now, but so too was my dread. In every shadow lurked the glinting of iron. In every fleshy pustule was an unrequited duty and questions left unanswered. For all her faults, for all her manipulations, as I trudged through the dank corridors of what seemed to be a flesh prison, I felt nothing but pity for my mistress. And whether this was out of some deranged mortal compassion, or her own magically hypnotic effects upon my mind at the turn of the year in Waldenhof, I cannot say. Elmeriel seemed to fade into darkness as I turned my head to check on his progress. His face was as white as the soul pupae. Heidi gripped her greatsword with an incredible ill nerve. I saw her, the tremble in her eyes. Jean-Paul, whom I expected to be in the worst state of mind now, was damn near glinting with greed. As his feet sloshed through living flesh, the idea of magical artifacts causing such strange phenomena seemed to give him more and more purpose. In his own way, I could see in Jean-Paul's stride that he too was gone. It was only a matter of time. Ursabet was whispering prayers of Verena, prayers for her own protection, for mine, and for her allies. She seemed to be the only one of my companions that remained untouched by this place. As for me, well, I felt the call of blood, the blood of my mistress, the blood in my veins. I remembered my imprisonment within the raptor's talon, the fist of bronze that commanded, and its indelible, unassailable power. Would I accept such a command again in order to smite down the dread lord of this place and rescue the object of my unnatural affections? Would I damn myself for her, for the destruction of the Great Enchanter? I didn't wish to confront the answer. Holding this strange semi-green torch forward, it seemed to glow with an unholy light. What was once a multi-headed fork in the fleshy road had become a single path. The flesh yawned into something more alive. The entire chamber lifted and fell, and I understood its intent. The heart of the castle. It beat, literally, for every motion, and I could feel my very soul fight for breath. Our weapons were already drawn. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I finally saw him. I saw him. He was clad in simple robes, thick and flowing, but they made my hairs stand on end. His cloak billowed with every beat of the castle heart. Thump, 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 thump. His face was entirely shrouded in shadow, save for his iron mask. He billowed magic, and that fear that roiled off his form was both tangible and ethereal at the same time. When he took a step forward, we took one back.
Finally, you have arrived. I was surprised so many of you made it down here.
The figure spoke, and his stride was almost casual as he paced back and forth. It was impossible to tell where his eyes lay under the darkness of that dull mask.
My castle projects its will onto those who retain within it, you see. It seeks to dominate the mind and destroy the body. You should be commended for making it this far.
Ursabet was deep into prayer, and Jean-Paul was looking around the room for any instances of the figure's power, and Heidi remained poised for an opening. All of us knew that this figure was far more than he put on. That aura of fear rooted us with such ease, it was impossible to tell otherwise.
But where to begin but the castle's new servants? Servants in life and slaves in undeath. Turinal was secretly a servant of Cain, and that may not come across as particularly noteworthy. His purpose was to kill me, of all people. Through this, he is perhaps the most moral of us all here, if I cared for such trivialities.
He snapped his finger. We saw Tuino's ghost, his soul wrapped around it. Tuino's screams echoed the halls. Another snap of his fingers. Another soul.
Dundurl. What a silly old fool. Seeking retribution for the crimes my servants of Slanesh had committed. Under my orders, of course. But I'm unsure if he ever realized this. Dundurl's anger was amusing.
Another snap.
El Mariel. He survived so long with you. Past the ball, my fire ghost. He even had the wit of wits in a debate against my puppet master. Fun. However, the smart ones always tend to see the truth before the rest, and his lack of wisdom has failed him inevitably. Of course, his body still roams the halls, but his soul is already mine.
The figure waved away the ghosts as one did droplets of water. He beckoned towards us.
Now, let us see what we have before me. Heidi, chief of criminals, after my own heart, are you?
I was here for the loot, Heidi acknowledged. But now? Your foulness is something not even I can condone.
And there's the moral character that causes me to sneer. Tut. And Jean-Paul, what do you see in those eyes of glinting gold?
Jean-Paul was damn near silent. He approached the figure, much to our shock. And then he fell to his knees in supplication. Whatever you desire, my lord. If I were to trade my soul for a fraction of this power,
There's a good lad. See, you have some measure of intelligence in your body. And Ursabet, let's be honest.
Ursabet ignored him entirely. Her prayers to Verena increased in volume.
Well, that's obvious, isn't it? You are a slave to the gods. And finally...
I interjected. Where is she?
Oh, Annette. That poor blood bond of yours, forcing you to do so many unsavory things. Your destiny was to live in some small town somewhere. Perhaps you would survive long enough to raise an insignificant family and measure some means of wealth on your passing. Still, your predicament ever amuses. A slave to two masters. and she knows not whom they are. One claims to serve the von Carsteins, but serves the Lobians instead. Her ask of you to spread word of an upstart's return was the same ask she had performed on countless others. It was to rally the Empire's folk against him, before he united Sylvania. Tell me, how does it feel to know that the burning desire in your heart, the one that caused you to trudge through monsters and hell itself, was all for a minor political scheme?
I couldn't hold back my anger. My fingers wrapped around the heft of my weapon. The bronze fist curled on its throne in the back of my mind.
And your second master, the one I think is far more interesting. Tell me, have you ever examined the runic symbols on your axe? If you were to give it to Ursibet, she would turn you to the witch hunters.
Ursibet's chanting never stopped, but I heard the slight tonal shifts.
That's right, Annette. Surely you knew. At least, you might have intuited. You were a slave to chaos, and your servitude is one way. I'd pity you, had I the capacity. All of you. You are doomed.
I brought my axe behind me. Ursibet broke her chant, and Heidi gasped. Annette, no! I couldn't hold back my fury, my rage. It boiled over, and I wanted nothing more than to smite this foolish sorcerer. I charged him with all my might. With an effortless flick of his wrist, I careened to the side, and I felt my ribs crack and break from the impact. Pain racked my form as I saw him approach the pair. Jean-Paul rose from his kneel as his new master passed him, and he aimed his crossbow at Heidi. Jean, was all she could muster as the bolt entered her throat. She fell, gurgling on her own blood. Ursibet's chants finally manifested. She lifted her arms in subservience to Verena, Lady of Knowledge and Justice. An aura surrounded her, and as Jean-Paul charged close, he found himself rebounded in the attack, launched backwards with a snarl. He loaded his crossbow, and Ursibet could do little else but maintain her spell, her eyes wide. Jean-Paul fell as my axe detached from his back, thrown by my hand. I mustered all the strength I had to distend myself from the flesh wall. The world seemed to move in slow motion as pain roiled off my skin. I saw the figure, effortlessly, reach through Ursibet's barrier. His fingers grasped her dainty neck. She gagged in his grip, and her priestly powers faded. My protests were caught in my throat.
You want to see the truth, slave. You want to see the truth. This is the truth.
The figure threw off his helmet. From this angle, I couldn't see what he had revealed to her, but Ursibet screamed. Her skin withered, her bones fractured, her eyes popped, and her blood boiled. Her body was smothered onto dust by the simple act of witnessing him. I gripped my axe, and with a snarl, I hurled myself at him. Or, no, at her? Whatever powers he had utilized, Drachenfels turned his head, and those powers had not killed me. Instead, I felt his magic fade and his body tremble. For those brief few seconds, only she remained. Emmanuel. Mistress. I can't hold him off for long. Emmanuel, save your strength, Annette. Save it for another lifetime. My soul broke in two. The blood bond compelled from me all I had, and even still, it pulled more. Feelings that I thought impossible burst forth like a broken dam of emotion. I fell to my knees in despair. As Emmanuel struggled, as her words became fainter, I realized the truth too, in my own way. There would never be any end to the torment Emmanuel had put over my soul. As a vessel for constant Drachenfels, she will forever be unable to set me free. The sorrow of this loss would never fade with time. It would never leave. And then, right then, I consigned myself to death. I am sorry. Emmanuel spoke as Drachenfels regained his composure. With a wicked grin, he placed his iron mask in its proper place.
Annette, the eternal slave. You've killed your own allies by proxy, and yet you feel nothing but self-sorrow. How delectably pathetic. How mortal. What to do with you, I wonder?
I stayed silent. I simply stared into the floor. I couldn't process my pain.
The blood of Nefertiti is insufficient for my purposes long-term, von Siert. Perhaps you might find another method to sustain me. Oh, you think yourself as just another long line of vessels. Don't be so optimistic. I know that would end your pain. You are a slave to a third master now, von Siert. So listen carefully. On the coast of the southern border princes lies a city, and under the foolish populace of Myrmidons lies a town of a most dreaded black.
The roiling waves within the Lagoon of Tears continued to buffet against the rocky shoreline. There was a dark intent to my travels, and I couldn't help but notice that much of the crew refused to even look in my direction. The only indication of my service was a small pin that clasped my cloak, an esoteric symbol that could easily be misconstrued as that of a noble house or godly church. I refused to say goodbye as I took my steps off of the ship, and the crew, too, said nothing as they began loading and unloading in the port city. This city was the most civilized in hundreds of miles, and it paled in comparison to any of the sites of civilization that I had recently visited. Still, I felt its ground thrum with power. Something deep under the earth stirred, and I knew where my journey lay.
Play the hero, Sienna, but your past is strewn with ashen dead. You're every bit as dangerous as Victor believes.
Castle Drachenfels is an adventure that comes from a time that directly demanded and desired skill from its player base. GMs during this period constantly oscillated between antisocial schizophrenic psychopaths and unsafe horny degenerates. No, I will not provide proof of this statement. Everything I say has a source. It came to me in a dream. The halls of Castle Drachenfels is sort of like Scooby-Doo meets Hitman Contract Slaughterhouse level, and frankly, I think that's pretty cool. The 100 or so rooms, 20 of which are completely up to the GM, are rather variable and relatively lore-friendly for the time, and Drachenfels himself ranges from coughing baby to insanely powerful super boss based on entirely how much your party optimizes their run and how utterly degenerate your GM acts. For example, the various masks of Constant Drachenfels in the library confers the characteristics of the mask onto the user. The paper mask dissolves into the user's face and turns them into a woman from Warhammer Japan, or a femboy from Warhammer Japan. If you combine this with pissing off the puppet master in the puppet theater, he uses a power on you where he turns you into a marionette and dances you around on his strings. My players took this as me injecting my dollification force femme hypnosis kink into the game, which to be fair was a good guess, but no, dollification force femme is canon in Castle Drachenfels. Then you go into the slough, which is like the zipper from the Flying Dutchman, and then your players just die instantly. You throw a microwave oven at your GM, and then you start over next week, finding yourself in a pocket realm of corn fighting a bone dinosaur, only to realize that you spent too much time poring over solid loot To the point where the final boss can just mog you with greater demons, well, in theory, and frankly, a single one can wipe any party, and the end is rather, unfortunate. In closing, if you are a 2nd or 4th edition Chad, I recommend heading on over to the Ratcatcher's Discord server and picking up a conversion bundle, one of the many free labor fanslaves have made. I jest, but they're actually incredible. Otherwise, if you are a 1st edition Chad, you may play the game raw and revel in the horror. Thank you so much for watching this video. Honestly, every single view and friend makes me really happy and gives me a sense of purpose beyond just eating, lifting, and coping with my paranoid schizophrenia and OCD. The mask is slipping, and I fear I have blinked once too many times when staring into the abyss. I send my love to the Dronified Collective for their views and thank them for their brain cells. It's been too long, and I will see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.